Next would be workshop item, discussion regarding Heritage Park development and operation. I would like to retailer to provide an overview of the issues and discussion items on Heritage Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll provide an overview, and then after I go through the high-level overview, I will also defer to the co-chairs of Parks and Recreation Committee whether you want to lead the discussion. But what we try to do here is to provide an overview of Heritage Park of any of the items or issues or questions that I've heard from trustees over the last couple of months. And some of these may be policy issues, some of them may not, but it all centralizes the various questions that have been asked over the last couple of months in here. We also have representatives both from Tria Architecture and Integral at tonight's meeting. One of the things that we want to discuss under any other items, any other issues or items under number 9 is to bring up the issues of waivers and payouts of the invoices so that we can clear up any confusion and get specific direction from the village board as to how you want to proceed. We also have a question in regards to how you want to handle payout number 4, since we're in the holiday season and payout number 4 has missed the Administration and Finance Committee meeting. So those are 2 other things that have been added on. So the overview tonight, I've also asked at some point Tria Architecture to provide an overview for the full board as to what has been completed in the park up to this point for active core and what has yet to take place in the spring, to kind of give you a summary of what has been done and what has yet to be done. Under each of these categories, specifically, we try to address what the issue is and then offer options. And so under each of these categories, we're just looking for direction from you if you have a preferred option or a preferred route that you want to go. When it comes to the future Heritage Park phases, we have explained the 9 phases in the memo. This was a direct outgrowth of the meeting that the village board had in July. One of the things we would recommend to you is to tie what you want to do with subsequent phases into the budget process. Because of the limited funding that the village has for capital projects, we view it's in your best interest to look at all your capital projects comprehensively, so then you can outline where do you want to go in the next fiscal year what's 2019/2020 and beyond. If you choose that you just want to look at the park first, you can go that route as well. But we have our finance director, John Sawyers, has outlined where we are funding-wise and how much funding we would have available in the next fiscal year for Heritage Park. I talked in the memo about future contracts with TRIA, and I'm working with the village attorney to come up with, if you want to view it as a master agreement on any type of professional services agreement moving forward for the village board. It just more clearly defines what the village's role is, insurance requirements, and it also would provide for any specific direction that you have or any specific items that we want to call out in the contract. Another section has been a policy item, more discussion, we've had some at the village board level as to what's the difference between an observation and an inspection and in subsequent contracts, whether you want to specify on-site inspections in lieu of observations, and if so, we have provided options with that. Between one would be requiring TRIA to hire a subcontractor to do the on-site engineering inspections. Another option is having the village hire on-site inspections. Third would be having village staff do it. There is a benefit from our perspective of having the contractor be responsible for that, so that it's all tied into one particular contract if there are any issues in the future. So that is one other section. Another section is the timing of the opening of the sled hill, as to whether you want to accelerate opening the sled hill. I know there have been questions asked as to whether to allow children to be able to access this winter. We included in here the cost if that were to take place, or going with the original schedule, just having the sled hill open next winter, not this winter. We also identified options and potential costs with relocation of the rain garden. I know there were some concerns expressed as to whether with the current location of the rain garden where any of the children would inadvertently sled into the rain garden. So we provide the detail, and I believe we have a representative from HR Green here tonight that if you have any specific questions on the design of the sled hill, the location of the rain garden, that he would be able to address that and answer that as well. Another component is fence removal. I know we had a previous discussion with the board on removal of the barbed wire on the top of the fence, which our staff has been doing very diligently in removing that, but I have gotten other questions as to whether there's any other spot removal that the village board may want of certain segments of the fence. So that's a policy discussion item for you and direction to be able to provide to staff. I have also heard a question on Heritage Circle lighting, so we have this on here as an item for discussion. As a reminder, Heritage Circle is a public street, so that there's some level of lighting that would be required to maintain it as a public street. And then the additional items that I already pointed out, which would be at the tail end of the discussion, I would ask Village Attorney Eric Hansen to outline, clearly explain, we want to make sure everyone understands the different types of waivers, what we've been doing with payouts, and if the direction that, if there's a change in direction on how to proceed on the payouts. So with that, I can go more into detail section by section, or I can defer to the co-chairs. I will handle this however you would like.
I don't know how much this is co-chairs as opposed to OEA, because we haven't really at the Parks Committee gone over any of these.
Your
This is all
fault.
OEA.
I would say take it phase by phase and go right
Okay.
on and ask the questions to, Jim's here too. I mean, he can help us along, tell us where we stand on a lot of that.
So then if we do that, maybe the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask maybe Jim Petrakis from Tria Architecture to come forward. And a good start would be an overview of active core as to what's been completed versus what still will take place in the springtime. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and happy birthday, Christina. For an overview for the park, I guess no better person than Chris, if you want to come up here. Chris is from Minute. He gave us an update at our OAC meeting today. He kind of explained what portions of the projects, if you actually drove around there and looked in, what you'd actually see and what you wouldn't see.
So starting at the challenge course, fitness, and nature play areas, we have all equipment is in place or will be in place within the next 2 weeks. Everything will be done in that area except for poured in place rubber surfacing. It's a weather-dependent item that will occur in the spring. Working there counterclockwise around court games area is complete. We have some tree grates that need to be set that will be done over the next few days. Counterclockwise from there is the sensory garden. That area as well is complete, except for, again, poured in place rubber surfacing for the spring. From there, sand volleyball is ready to go, except for the equipment, which is the 2 posts and nets. That will occur probably by the end of December. Be ready to go when spring hits. From there, we have tennis and pickleball courts. Paving did not get installed this fall, weather-related reasons, as well as some moisture issues and plants closing a little bit earlier this year than anticipated. So all of the paving on the job will occur in spring as soon as plants open, targeting sometime in March, hopefully. Should be by early April at the latest. That will include the courts getting paved and the perimeter pathway as well. From there, once the paving's in place, the fencing can go in, the athletic equipment, which is the post for the nets, as well as the color coding that. So that finishes up the courts. The sports lighting's in place for those. And gateways are now installed at all entrances. Pavilion will be going up over the next 2 weeks. We will hold off on the roofing and the masonry related to that until weather is more conducive for that work. And I think that might be it. Landscaping will occur in the spring. That was always the plan, phase 3. Turf and the remaining plantings. Most of the trees are in place in all phases of the site. That's it.
Any other questions on that?
Do you anticipate being your longest timeline on those things once you get started back up in the spring? Or in place, or the paving, or?
Our weather sensitive items are poured in place. You have to have a 50-degree and rising temperature for that. Asphalt is plant-related openings, which again is sometime between 315 and 415 usually each year. And
Well, masonry and all the... posts and everything.
masonry is 40 degrees and rising, so sometime probably in March that can be started.
That's all above ground too, right? So it's really not,
Yes, yeah, it can be done.
it's just temperature,
Just ambient air temperature that has to be there. Those are really it. There's not, the contract says 6/3 is the date. Obviously, the goal is to finish this job well ahead of that. It's all going to be weather dependent in the spring. You know, the seed spec usually says mid-April is when you can put that down to start germination. So the consensus, I think, from the whole team has been leave the fencing up while that occurs in the spring. So it may, that, whatever the village determines, that may run into May anyways.
If I can add to that, so one of the problems we had with the stone, and we can talk about it later, one of the allowance draws that we're talking about was the extra stone. That was weather related. We kind of excavated for the tennis courts, the pickleball courts, and the path around, and then everything was fine. Then weather hit, we kind of got soggy there, so there's some extra time and effort to kind of remove some of the bad soil and everything, put new stone in here. Again, we can talk about it afterwards because this was brought up at the last board meeting. But that same scenario may happen in spring. Obviously, it's going to rain and everything. So if we're lucky, it doesn't rain that much, and the stone's good, the proof rolling is good, and they can start the asphalt right away. But it will, obviously it's spring, so we don't know. Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay.
So I'll jump into the next item then. I'm going to do really two areas at once, talking about the future phases of Heritage Park and also talking about funding. So July 25th, the board had a meeting, committee of the whole meeting to discuss future phases. I know Architect Petrakis was there and reviewed this with the board. In the memo, you'll see summarized the items that we place the greatest emphasis. Phase 1, the disc golf. The board agreed to move forward Phase 1A, which is estimated cost about $35,000. Phase 2A, which is open play, which is schematic design for baseball backstop and soccer field. Estimated cost of Phase 2A was approximately $355,938. And when you look at Phase 3A Sled Hill, that's already been taken care of, part of the 319 grant. The Sled Hill is has been constructed, as well as tying into active core. And then Phase 4A, Village Hall Christmas Tree and 151st Street streetscape. So 151st Street sidewalk was taken out, and the village board has applied for state grant funding of the approximate cost of $100,000 for that project. And when you look at the remainder of that, there's an estimated $844,875. That would be part of it. So when you look at all of those phases that at the July 25th meeting, it was evident that the board was interested in going forward. A couple of things, as I stated at the beginning, you may want to consider to tie this into the fiscal year 1920 budget process, since it's right around the corner, to be able to look at all the capital projects in its entirety. But I wanted, at least at tonight's meeting, our finance director, John Sawyers, to give you an overview of the funding and your potential funding sources for any other future phases of Heritage Park. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Sawyers.
Okay, well, the village has funding for completion of active core. It's in the budget. It's funds available. But for the next phase, the village has $1 million in the capital project fund that's unobligated that could be used for funding. And also in the debt service fund, which is the home rule sales tax fund. It pays the bond principal and interest. The fund accounting policy says that if we're bringing in excess of $2 million of home rule sales tax annually, which we are, we bring in about 2.7, And on December 1st, the fund balance is more than $1 million. The December 1st is key because that's the day we pay the bond interest and principal. So after we pay the bond interest and principal, as long as the balance is in excess of $1 million, we could sweep it over. And that number is about $1 to $1.2 million available to be swept from the debt service fund that could go to capital projects to fund the next phase of Heritage Park. So approximately $2 to $2.2 million would be funds on hand available for the next phase. Above and beyond that, it would probably require some financing.
So in the memo, one of the questions we have is how do you want to proceed? I mean, we could just present this information to you, some of the options that have been identified in regard to future phases, and after I finish, I don't know if Mr. Petrakis has anything else he wants to add in regards to the phases, but option 1 is to discuss the proper allocation of funds during the fiscal year 2020 budget process. So all the capital projects are reviewed in their entirety. Option 2, include cost estimates for phases 1, 2A, and 4A in fiscal year 2020 budget preparation, estimated at a total cost of $1,235,813. And option 3 is anything else that the board identifies. So with that, I'm going to look at Mr. Petrakis to see if there's anything else that you would want to add in the detail on the future phases.
Sure. If the board remembers at our workshop, the goal of that workshop was to kind of determine what projects you wanted to proceed with and try to go out to bid this summer or this winter with. The direction of the board was we need more information of what kind of some of these phases look like, what kind of details are in there, like what was a fishing pond, where would that actually lay out now, and so forth. So direction was to take a lot of these phases and take it to the next level, do a schematic design, actually lay out certain areas. If everyone remembers, like the open play area, we said, okay, kind of instead of doing the entire open play area, let's lay it all out, let's look at it better, let's see if we can plan for several courts. I think we had some information on how many soccer fields we did, how many backstops and so forth. Lay it out, but only say, if we only did one backstop and one soccer field, what would it be? What's the cheapest spot to put that soccer field? So we're trying to plan this all out. And then once we did the schematic design for each one of these phases, to come back to you and say, okay, what would you want to go out to bid? Unfortunately, we were talking about this winter, so we weren't in the same spot as we were for active core. Unfortunately, timing-wise and budget-wise, we're trying to figure that out and just say, okay, it's the board's discretion to say, wipe that clean and just say, let's not even look at what the schematic design is, don't take it to the next level. We really want to do option 2 or phase 2A, and that is there. But it's certainly your call on how you want to do it, how you want to approach it, or if you want more information on each one of these phases. To us, it's more of a timing issue because the more items you do, you design it, and then if you select it, now you're into spring of next year, and then we're starting to do construction documents again. We're back out and going out to bid again, early summer. And I don't want to put that in any spots. I don't want, us, trying to run through the project. I don't want anybody tripping and falling on any of these projects. So that's why we have you here for discussion today.
Well, I would like to wait until we get this section done so we know what money we're left at right now. Because about a year ago, we had 3.4 million in the budget, or as for money on hand. Now we're down to 24 million. I'd like to see where we're at when we're finished. Right now. If you go out and get bids, and we don't do it for a year, those bids are worthless. Because you know they're going to go up or they're going to go down. So why would I spend money? It's just going to...
The bids, you may throw the bids out, but the drawings wouldn't be bad. If the project is what the project actually is. In terms of active core, the budget was 2.6. We got in at 2.6. Out of that $2.6 million, there's $200,000 allowance. So plus what we just approved at the last board meeting in terms of allowance draws. So we're past the critical parts where bad soils, we encounter bad soils, we encounter anything that's underground or septic fields or peat moss or any of those things. So we kind of got over that hill in terms of the large costs. So unless the board wants to change things or do anything with the active core, that number is probably going to hover around that $2.4 million project for this one here. And then whatever you proceed with, if you do proceed with any of these things, drawings don't go bad. If you actually design a fishing pier, say, as an option, you can shelve it, you can bid it out, reject all bids, and shelve it and do it the next year. And the only cost you'd have is just rebidding it again because the drawings would be accurate, unless something changed on that fishing pond. Same with the open play, same with the amphitheater, same with all those.
So I have a question for Director Sawyers. Of the $2 million, we just approved, starting to look at some drainage projects for next year. Would funding for something of that nature come out of that same $2 million?
No. Stormwater improvements and mitigation comes out of the bond fund.
Okay.
And we're forecasting about a little over $2.5 to $3 million left in the bond fund for future stormwater work.
Okay, and of that $2 million, then, if we were to go ahead with one of these plans, especially the option 2, which is 1.235 million of that, which would leave us, what, in the neighborhood of $760,000. We still have other parks and amenities throughout the village that we need to take care of and make sure we're staying on top of, as well as maybe serving some underserved areas. So could we confidently anticipate another $2 million in the next fiscal
No.
budgetary year?
No, the capital project fund, that $1 million from that is from home rule sales tax sweeps from years past. We swept $600,000 last year into the park fund, and hopefully we can do something like that again.
Right.
But there's no specific obligated revenue source for this at the moment. Home rule sales tax is locked down into debt service unless it exceeds that, that threshold that I mentioned. So no, not really. It's not an annual thing until the debt is paid off.
Right, and we have that money.
Then that would free that up, but no. Parks is getting a little bit lean because we're growing. The maintenance cost of the park systems is substantial. It's still funded well by the local motor fuel tax, but there's not a lot of growth in that. We've seen a decline with the 159th Street project. So it's lean, it can't fund significant capital improvement work. So you're left with, so we're really talking about $2 million of equity that's built up over years, and you need to decide how you want to parcel it out.
Right.
On the active core, what did we have budgeted in this year's budget for that project?
The aggregate was I think 3.3, and it was split between the MFT fund for the road, the MFT qualified expenses, and the 319 portion came out of the bond fund, and that was, we're getting some grant funding on that. That's going back into the bond fund, and then the balance came out of the park, but I believe the aggregate was about 3.3. So the park will realize some surplus from that.
So that was going to be my question. So we budgeted 3.3.
Yes.
We think it's going to come in 2.4 final. Maybe it gets to 2.5, but it's pretty far along. Where's that difference?
That'll be in the park fund.
Okay.
And the park fund has forecasted fund balance. If it spent the full 3.3, it would have been pretty lean. It would have been under 500 grand, I believe. So that surplus will be nice, but it could be used if it's substantial, which it could be 500K plus, could fund a small park.
Is there anything else out of that difference that we're spending that money on currently? 3.3 to 2.5, that difference there.
No.
You're saying $500,000. That's more likely to be closer to 800,000, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not accounted for in this $2 million that we're talking
That's
about?
correct.
Okay.
That's right.
But obviously other expenses of parks, and Heritage Park isn't the only park in town, as Trustee Gray said.
But that 800,000 can only go back into the parks fund. Is that correct? Because it came out, it's budgeted out of there, so we
That's
don't
correct.
go back into that.
Because some of that, the park fund has developer contributions, and it has to go towards, and the village obligated the local motor fuel tax for parks too, so yeah, that's true, it would need to be spent on
So before we
parks.
sweep in there, it might be behoove us to see what that balance is going to be.
The village manager and I were talking, I think going forward, you might see park improvement as a line item in the capital project fund in the future. It might make more sense to do it that way. It's a 50-50 at this point, and it could turn out like that over time.
I know the discussion for the larger capital projects is part of next year's budget, and we'll do that after the first of the year, but just off the top of your head, what would be those main things that could be also potentially eating at this 2 million?
Well, any kind of
What would be the reason?
small road work?
Yeah, if we're talking about, hey, this is potentially, the potential is there to allocate this towards Heritage Park or parks, or what would be the other capital projects that we wouldn't want to tap this whole 2 million for Heritage Park or another phase or anything else?
Any kind of small road work project that wouldn't be funded by the highway district or wouldn't have state funding. We could probably run that through MFT, but that's pretty well funded, but that's typically, we run small road work projects through the capital project fund. We've done some, we've obligated the capital project for some LOC work, where we've drawn on an LOC. That's where it's parked in there. It's not a lot. So it's been fairly dormant in the past few years, 3 to 5 years. Capital project you've not seen a lot of activity out of that.
And look, John, I like that you're a conservative planner, and that's benefited the town, and the 3.3 budgeted for the 2.4, or whatever this ends up being, I think is a example of that.
Well, that came out of the original docs from PRI, and we just, it was the best that we had. It was, at least it was somebody else's projection.
Sure.
It wasn't our guess at that point. So that's where those numbers came from.
Of the 2 million, if we decided that this is something we think we want to put into phases of Heritage Park, what's that number that you're comfortable with from a conservative standpoint?
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what's on the horizon for next year for smaller road work. I could get back to you on that, because we're just starting the budget process, and Mike has a lot of, he provides a lot of the data for all the miscellaneous projects that we have to fund and where it gets funded out of.
And just, is any idea of whether that's potentially 200,000, 500,000, 800,000 ballpark?
We probably want to obligate $250K of that.
Okay.
For smaller work.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, this year's work is progressing well. We hopefully will have another sweep out of the general fund. So because of that, I would say we could probably obligate 250 of it and use the balance for large work.
Okay. So my only point on that, Mayor, to your original point, to wait to see what this comes out. This project is percentage along completion.
70-something%, 75%.
75%.
Active core.
The active core.
Said one section.
The active core. What's budgeted and what we're saying is we had budgeted and what the final expense is going to be, right? That project, that 2.4 that we're estimating at this point is 75% complete?
Correct.
Okay. So for me, it's a timing where we do need to move, I think, more quickly than we did on this project because of the timing of the bid, because we pressed to get this out, because there was probably a premium to when we went out to bid on this instead of going out over the winter, which is the optimal time as contractors are starting to plan their year. That would be the reason that I would say if we have John saying conservatively, he thinks we have somewhere 1.5 to 1.75 of that 2 million to spend on something like this. I think we have to consider that and look at the timing of that now to keep moving so we can get the best prices, go out and bid in the winter and keep moving forward. And because if this project was 10% along, I'd be more hesitant to, guess what it's going to end up at. But we know we budgeted 3.3, and it's going to come in pretty close to 2.4 at this point because it's 75% along, and the unforeseen things are, for the most part, behind us. There's that pot of money, and I think timing does matter on this, and that's why I think this conversation tonight is a good time to have this conversation. But while there are other capital projects, if John's saying the big ones are covered, and we may have some minor ones, and we have $1.5 million, I think that's still, a $250,000 buffer in between the conservative number. I think it's something we have to entertain, and kind of time matters.
You guys want to talk about it? I have no issue with talking about it. I just I'm uncomfortable with how low we have gone down the money, because if something did drastic happen, we don't have any other source of money coming into this village. And that could run into the problem. Unfortunately, nobody knows anything what's going on, especially right now with politics in this country.
Well, that's a great point. I think we need to really focus as a board on additional revenue sources, figure out where we can bring some more revenue in, be able to fund these and other projects going forward. So, but I agree with what Brian's comment is, in the sense that we want to get it at the best value. And I'm sure Jim can speak to that as it relates to bids, and the timing is everything. And if you miss the time slot, you go to bid in the spring, and you guys will forget about it until the following spring.
I look at it as a stock market. Stock's way up, stock takes a big dump. Goes up a little, takes another dump. I'm just cautious right now until something levies, it just levels out a little bit in this country. It's not doing it. And we're in a position where we still have money to be able to do some things. But I also thought that when we did this park, we were going to try to get this thing done in a couple of years. It was going to be a few year project. So I mean, if we continue on, we're pretty much getting this thing done in here in probably 2.5 years. I don't know if we have to rush it. That's why I'd like to see what it looks like when we're done. If it looks good, they said they could probably get back to this.
It will look good.
When we talked earlier, we thought that this thing would be open for the public on the 23rd, and I would think bidding-wise would be better to go for the fall, because if we go through the winter, you're coming in the summer, and that's when everyone's prices is much higher, isn't it?
Not from what I understand. I think it's just the opposite. You get the most amount of bids, and you would know this better.
It's all based on the construction period. So you can see right now, the construction's almost coming to a halt. So you want to have construction based in the summer sometime, a little bit of spring, a little bit of fall. But then when you back out bidding time, design time, and so forth, that kind of puts you into those winter months, and that's when contractors are finishing other public jobs, right? In October, November, they're finishing school jobs and so forth. So they're looking for the next summer's job to do things.
But do they build a contingency in there for the inflation of products and materials?
Any contractor that bids on, if you were to say they bid on it today and that project was for tomorrow, we've done 2-year projects where they have inflation, they were afraid of the steel tariffs and so forth, so you saw their prices go up because they kind of try to accommodate for that. But they cover it. Once they bid on it, today's dollar is always cheaper than tomorrow's. They try to bid on it and you try to lock it in, that's it. They can't claim inflation, they can't claim, cost of living, it's none of that. It's a hard bid for that project.
The 355 for the open play, that's primarily just grading and engineering, correct?
Correct. There was like one backstop, I believe, in there, and just making sure like one soccer field was kind of, nobody broke an ankle.
I have a question. We just threw around a lot of numbers here. We said $1 million in capital project, and then like home rule funds and bond fund, and I'm going to go back to John just for a minute. I know Brian just picked your brain a lot, but can you just give us a recap of those numbers real quick? So
Yes. So total funds available for capital project work above and beyond active core is approximately $2 million. It comes from the fund balance in Fund 70 Capital Project Fund, which is about $1 million. And also, there is another $1 million available in the debt service fund, because our fund accounting policy says that if our balance is above $1 million on December 1st, that amount in excess of $1 million can be swept for other purposes. And we are significantly above that threshold. The sum of those two figures is the $2 million that we're throwing around. Now, that's for everything. And we don't have a lot of funding above and beyond that for the future because there's no designated revenue stream for capital project work. So I was asked, what do you think we should obligate for small capital projects for next year? And I said about 250 grand. Brian, Trustee Varian said, let's make it 500. So we took a $2 million that we have, less $500,000 for small road work and miscellaneous things. And that's where that $1.5 million came from. The park fund should realize a surplus from the amount that we budgeted, which was 3.3, versus where it's going to come in at 2.4. So they'll also realize a windfall. We're not really proposing to use that right now. The park fund will need it in the future for smaller parks. Yes, did you have any other questions? Was that?
See, I just wanted to, for everybody to understand, especially me, so we have about $1.5 million.
That's correct.
Conservative.
Yeah.
Director Sawyers, maybe you can answer another question. I know that one of the projects of the Parks and Recreation Committee is creating a priority list of future parks. So any future parks, neighborhood parks to be funded, can you explain to the board where that funding comes out of and approximately how much is there so that they can understand that in its totality?
Well, in the past, it's come out of the park fund, which primarily received its funds from equity sweeps, which is the home rule sales tax sweeps or the general fund surpluses, and developer contributions. It's the primary source for funding the trail system and small parks. With the expansion of the park system and the increased maintenance costs, that park fund isn't really, it doesn't build up a lot of funds like it used to. We spend a lot of money on the maintenancing of the park system. So if the availability for funds in the future for parks isn't what it used to be. Hopefully the local motor fuel tax will kick back up and it'll free it up, but you know, it could probably handle maybe a couple $100,000 a year towards park improvements, which is really nothing for a park improvement. So it's really going to take 2 years of surplus in the park fund to do any kind of minimal park improvement.
So could you, just to take it one step further, then if a board member has a question, any of the potential funding that you've outlined for Heritage Park, can any of that potential funding also be used for any of these neighborhood parks if the board so desires?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In the past, we really haven't funded parks out of the park fund that weren't grant funded. So we were using the park fund as the matching source for grant funded park improvements.
Thank you.
Because being on the Parks Committee, our committee has had many discussions on adding new parks in different subdivisions. And yes, this park is great, but we have residents coming to our park meeting saying that they need a park, they would like a park in their local subdivision. So out of this $1.5 million, if we, as a board, decided to move forward with an additional smaller park in a subdivision, that would also come out of this 1.5.
That's correct.
But it's 1.5 for the sweep, but then you're not taking into consideration the difference between the budgeted amount of 3.1 for Heritage and the 2.4 that came in, right?
That's right.
So there's actually that as well.
So the park fund should realize an increase in its fund balance. I would recommend that you wouldn't use all of that, but that's something that we could look at with the next budget cycle as funding for smaller parks. As we start to get further into the Heritage Park payout process, we'll see. Hopefully, we realize that nice gain from the budget difference, the budget variance.
And you said the trail system also comes out of that, correct?
That's correct.
And how far along are we, like what's the projected expense on that as well?
I'm not sure on that one because it's got legs, it's got some, Mike would know better. I can't give you real specifics on that, but that generally is also grant funded. We get a lot of the engineering costs back on that. So I don't know yet, we haven't met on that yet.
What has it typically been grant funded at, like 80/20 or?
Correct, yes.
Like I said, I understand that you guys want to keep going on this, and I'd like to see the park finished too, but I also want to see if something does come up that we're good with being able to pay for it. Because I don't want to get it down so low, it actually surprised me how low it is right now. But I know we're still in very good shape, but it still scares me, because like I said, you just don't know. We've got a lot of flooding problems still left in this village. We ordered on some stuff tonight, and we got 2.5 now right now. We're looking at 4. We're looking at 4, possibly 4 this year, depending on what the costs are. Because I know we had Meadow Crest.
Meadowcrest, Stabler Ridge, Country Woods, and Chickasaw Hills Unit 6.
Yeah. And that's 3 where the people have a lot of problems. So I mean, I'm not comfortable with the uncertainty of where this could go. And right now, from a cost, it's saying to the net cost for Heritage Park so far paid to date, $5,231,078. You guys, you know, it's really, when you stop and think about it, it's up to you. I'm just trying to put it in perspective of where I think we are, and I think waiting a few months just to make sure that everything's good isn't a problem. Like I said, if we went and got the plans, ballpark plans, what do you think?
You wouldn't do all of them, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly, you know, I don't know what section we're talking about now and what sections are still left. Because I know at one point,
Right.
band shell was thought about, and I think that we could do the same thing in Lennox instead of a band shell, you know, just do a structure that covers it.
So to refresh everyone, the goal from the July meeting was go out, get us a proposal to do schematic design on these items. So phase 1 was disc golf, that was totally separate. You guys are doing that completely separate. Phase 2A was the open play, that was over here next to the ring road, just providing us a soccer field, making sure we can lay it out, but providing the cheapest soccer field that we could and a backstop. But actually taking it to the next level of schematic design, of doing some better level, higher level designs and cost estimating with between HR Green and Lori with Greenberg Farrow to say the actual cost, even though we said here it's $355 because, but we've gone out there, we've looked at it, investigated, we've laid it all out. It could come in at $200. It could go up depending on where. It was about giving you guys information and you can pick and choose from there. So phase 3A was a sled hill. As much as the sled hill is okay as it is, like somebody can use it or whatever it is, it was just getting to the next level where somebody can actually access it to it, there's paths to it, so nobody's trudging through the snow and so forth. But giving you a layout, and the comments from the workshop was, I don't know what that 131,000 actually means because there's no design associated, there's no drawing. Phase 4A was cleaning up around Village Hall, the back area, providing where the Christmas tree area was, and cleaning up on 151st, and depending on at least giving a design with what it would be like, and then if the 151st Street expanded, what it would turn to. Activity area was just over here to the east, just to do a shelter. We cut everything down, just said just provide a shelter, that's something there. And that was, again, low. That was phase 5, that was low on the priority. And then phase 6 was a fishing dock, just saying, you know, some of the comments from that workshop were, is this a floating dock? Is it a fixed dock? What does it look like? Is it handicap accessible? Are there lights on it? And so forth. So just taking it to the next level to say, this is what we recommend, this is that cost to it, and then you guys, it was supposed to be at this point, you can sit there and say, got it, we've got funds, let's just do one project for $100,000. Or let's do 2 projects for $400,000. It was able to give you that, but this was kind of put on hold because we didn't know what funding was there, so.
Well, that's what I'm kind of worried about right now too. So what I would like to do, if the board's okay with it, get something black and white, and at the next meeting it gives everyone at least a couple of weeks to look at this and see where you feel with it for spending money.
So do you want him to put together a proposal for a schematic plan for 2A, 4A, and 3A, right? Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
You have a proposal in your hands right now to do all those.
Right, so I
Just to do
guess I
schematic.
understand what you're asking me. You want a proposal
Well,
for,
part of, well, you understand, I just got to the end and say it's 6A, so we're at 3A, I'm taking for right now. So, how far do you want to go? Are we at a 4A?
I think it's,
Well, I think that's what we were
looking at
trying to get
2A
at.
and 4A, because remember we kind of prioritized this 1, 2, 3, and 4, so 1 is done, so now we're looking to look at 2, 3 is done, we're looking to look at 4. And we're not looking to, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not saying we're putting this out to bid because we can't put it out to bid because we don't know what we're putting out to bid. We need to create a plan. So I think, if I'm hearing you right, we want to, we want to create a plan so that should we feel comfortable, or when we feel comfortable, we can then go, we have the plan. So we're not here having this discussion, taking 4 months to put together a plan that can then go out to bid. So this is more just putting together the plan for option 2.
Right. You have a
First
proposal.
that was to find out from Director Sawyer is how much money do we have at our disposal? Where's the comfort level on, do we spend it all? Do we go to the tables? You know,
But that price will
equally.
change it too, though, every time someone suggests something.
Right, so now knowing what
This-
Director Sawyer might be comfortable with, as well as what our future needs might be in the next, year or two, what, based on this list, do we maybe want to still go ahead with, or do we want to change this up and say only disc golf and open play, or maybe we take out phase 4 and we only go with, one of the other ones?
That's what I'm saying, do you think a week is gonna screw something up if we look at this and figure out where we're at with money?
So Mayor, for us, if you award the proposal to us to do the schematic design, it will be several weeks. Obviously now it's even winter, Christmas time. Part of that was going out and walking the fields and seeing what the issue is. So weather dependent, this would be a couple weeks, 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks to see if we can do it. And if winter hits, then that's on hold.
All right.
But yeah, I would say, my recommendation is, it would stay the course of what your direction was at the July meeting, was get us more information of what these could look like, and and then you can choose from there what to go out to bid, or not to go out to bid. You sit there, then you can reassess your dollars at that point and say, we can't, because the schematic design was put on hold because the word was, there's no funds to even build this, let alone even pay for the schematic design services, so just put it on hold. It's a little bit different story now, so I would recommend, and I'm not saying it to sell, but the direction in July was get more information that you can present to the board and they can make logical decisions.
Yeah, but isn't that what the mayor asked us, get a schematic design price to us?
You're
Oh,
and the mayor was saying, like, can we meet in a week to do it? And it's going
I
to
see, okay.
it's going to take a while for us to.
Yeah, we have the price for schematic design. What he's saying is, do you want me to pull the trigger on that so that you know what you're looking at for 1, 2A, and 4A, so that we can then budget or not budget or whatever the case may be?
I think to Jim's point, when we met in July and prioritized these things, the point was, we were doing active core, and we were, for lack of a better term, kind of tapped out financially. This $2 million that I think is being presented tonight is good news. And I would say that had we known in July about the $2 million, I think we would have said, go into schematic design, because that was the point of prioritizing this. And we said at the time, plans don't go stale. And had we done that in July, August, we potentially, if we wanted to, be ready to start going out to bid right now, which is optional. So in that way, we're already kind of behind the curve. Go to schematic design now. You're talking 6 to 8 weeks. We're into January and decide to do something. So we're ready. I mean, again, the clock is ticking again, but if we're going to do something, we're ahead of the curve better than we were last year when we went out for active core. So, and I don't know what data, what numbers, what information we're going to have in 2 months or 3 months different than what we have before us tonight. And what we're talking about, if you take 2A open play and you take 4A and you combine those, you're talking 1.2 million potentially. If you
And
did
those are
it,
the, and
go ahead.
those are the PRI numbers that, those are not.
No, these are now the updated numbers you gave us in July, correct? These are not those PRI
Those are
numbers. These now-
pre-design, our numbers, looking at it and just saying, this is what we can kind of do, kind of modeling off what we did at Active 4, saying, we know the style, we kind of set that with the board and everything, and what it would look like and so forth, and that level of design, and then trying to transfer that onto. But there was a lot of questions in the July meeting of, what does it look like? What does $125,000 look like on a sled hill, right? So we didn't have those answers.
Well, here's what we know. Well, construction costs are going down, right? So if we're going to do it and we have the dollars, it's always going to be cheaper to do it sooner rather than later than wait. That's point one. But point two is if we wait a couple months and then go to schematic design and then decide we do have the money and we're going back out to bid in June, we end up more than likely with what would occur with Active 4, which was not a high number of bidders that we would have liked to be competitive, and the premium goes up because of the timing of that bid. So I think sometimes I think everything we're talking about is conservative, and we're a conservative village. But sometimes we're so conservative that it ends up costing us in the back end, and that's the only point I'm trying to make here.
No, and I do understand. So all I would say then to you guys is you decide if you want to approve it or if you want to hold off on it, and can take a roll.
Well,
Or
this
no,
is-
actually, we're not,
yeah.
just trying to see.
Yeah.
The only thing we're talking about is moving forward on schematic design on any of these options. That's it. This isn't a decision to go out to bid on anything.
Well, that's correct.
And those plans, and like we talked about in July, those plans don't go stale. I mean, these are things that we prioritize to say, hey, these are the things we think we're doing for sure at some point. So I think it's not making a decision to go spend $1.2 million in April. It's saying, keep pushing forward on this project and make decisions, but try to do it in a way that is financially prudent, that we're getting the best dollars and the best.
Well, I didn't bring my computer tonight, and I don't have the papers with all the numbers on it. So what was the schematic cost again?
Schematic cost was, we didn't do that in math, I know we talked about it at one point. So it was taking that construction cost that was there, I can get that to you. So it's taking that construction cost.
15% of the 1.235?
15% of that 1.325, and then our fee of that. Our fee's 8% of that. 9% of that. It was like, I think when we did the math, it was like 50, 60,000 for all of them, all together.
And does that include the sled hill or is that out of my
This
This
included-
included the original proposal on the schematic.
That's why I asked if we could get it back next week. I'd like to just take a look at it. All
Yeah.
the stuff running through my head just gets off.
Sure, the proposal was open place, sled hill, village hall, active area, and fishing dock only.
Schematic design.
Schematic design for those.
All of those, sort of $60,000.
60,000?
I got to, because you got negotiated fees already, this is based on a percentage, just doing schematic design. Like if we started a project, just did schematic design and stopped.
Yeah, a little bit of separate topic. At one point, that now that we're seeing parts of this project out there, when I actually go and see the pond, I'm not as convinced that we need what may be a $300,000 dock on a pond that appears smaller than I think I saw it in my head, right? And with the staggered stones, I think, for my kids that fish all the time in all these ponds, I don't know about a $300,000 dock. So my mind may have changed on that just because of the size of that pond and the ability to fish that pond as is. And it's $300,000 that I think maybe we can use. So that's where things like that have changed. But the open play, the village hall portion, to continue improving this portion for those community events, I think we've set our priorities. And
The shelter that you were talking about, where was that shelter going to go, Jim?
Hold on one second, I'm just figuring this times.
what was the vision?
I thought we were going to put one right out here, because that's.
shelter?
No, a shelter.
You're talking about the picnic.
Oh, that was right over here.
Yeah.
Goes
I went
right.
out by New Lennox, if you've gone, you see where they have the concerts there? I mean, it's not really a, you got bathrooms and stuff on the inside. If they paid $2 or $3 million for that, they're cool.
But we're not, at that point, we're not even
No,
considering.
no, no, I'm just saying, but there's certain
Because
things.
that's the things that are going to take multi-year budget proposals through Director Sawyer's, where we take those funds over multi-years and dedicate them so that we do get a collective, or we go out to bond on something that big. But that's 9 conversations away from this.
All right, so forget my, let's go back to schematic design for a second.
Schematic design, the fee was $67.
Okay, how come this proposal, without having to look at 5 other documents, doesn't say $60,000?
Because you negotiated a fee.
Because the black and white should be.
Let him ask.
It says
The fees were negotiated in 2015, so it's just, it's always, the project authorizations are always based on that.
I know, but I think for clarity purposes, I'm not saying you're wrong.
We can.
For clarity purposes, for me, I'm looking at a document that's 4 pages long that shows me a construction budget of $5,632.
$5 million.
Yeah, the way we took it, so the
I'm sorry, $5,632,218.
I'm sure saying, oh my God.
Yeah.
right, so the math is $5.6 million, and then per the contract, and that rate is an 8% fee.
But for clarity purposes for me,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at this document, it's 2018, and we're talking about 2015, construction documents and things that we've talked about.
I will
I
clarify.
would love to see it explicit in future documents,
So,
just because it's that much clearer, we don't have to dig paperwork up and talk about where these numbers came from for an hour and 10 minutes.
So
Sure.
we're talking about approving maybe 67,000 to put together a schematic design. That's-
On all of these items.
Right.
Now, just to Trustee Burion's point about the fishing pond, I'd still like to see a schematic design on, at least, like you said, I've seen it out there, all these tiers are very nice and everything, and I don't think your firm was involved in the planning of that. But I think we need to take a fresh look at it now that it is there, and say, if we weren't going to do the dock, is it ADA compliant? Because we want to certainly make sure that anybody in the village can access that.
right.
So I don't know personally if that was built into it or not, or if a pier would address that, or if we said, hey, you know what, we're not going to go with a fishing dock or pier, but we can maybe spend some of that money on making it compliant so that, you know, we open up its scope too, so.
Sure.
I'd like to keep it in the mix, at least as far as that.
Yeah, I
goes.
don't think a pond has to be ADA compliant, but we may want to consider making.
Right, just so
Well,
another,
I think
somebody
we should
can
check.
get down there
Just to
and
make sure that-
That's what this goal was. In July, everyone kind of said, what does X amount of dollars mean for a fishing pier? Does it have lights and everything? We were just throwing pre-designed numbers on it, saying, we can, and that was with your village manager, Mike Mertens at the time, saying, cut that out, you don't need those lights, you don't need this, you don't need X, let's get that down to a manageable number that we know the board and the village would want. So we kind of cut a lot of those things out. When you look at all those diagrams for each phase, there's an A, that's why there's an A and a B. A was, what can we do right now to kind of make things kind of work? And then B was, if we won the lottery, we can make this the best sled hill ever, you know, that's there. So that's why these A's were there, and that our task would be, with our team, to go down, look at every one of those aspects, and come back with schematic design and more accurate cost estimates, and give you better designs, but you can look at it and say, I really thought that pier was going to be longer, I thought there would be more stairs, 2 stairs going up the sled hill. You can have that interaction and talk about those costs. Then I can take off costs, add costs as we're doing it, and we can work it. It's a workshop item.
Okay.
I want to speak.
No, go ahead.
I always thought phase 1 and 4A were always kind of just included with the projected 3 point whatever. So I'm totally fine with moving forward with that. I'm not so sure I remember the open play with the backstop and soccer field, but I had baby brains, who knows. But I do have a question. Out of that 2.4, how much was spent on unforeseen circumstances?
2.4, oh, active core.
Yeah.
So the project was what's the total cost? 2.637. Out of that, there was a $200,000 allowance for unforeseen items, the bad soils and so forth.
Can I stop right there? Can you please explain to everybody what the $200,000 is for? Because there's some uncertainty, and I'd like you to address that.
Great question. I was going to talk about all that with them later on the Heritage Park, so this is great. So in your $2.6 million project, when we bid out the project, we put in there an allowance money. We put on this project $200,000 because we knew that when we talked to Ted, when they did the ring road and so forth, that there were some bad soils in certain areas that we didn't know what we were going to incur. So when you have a site where Integral may be out there working and they encounter bad soils, instead of it being delayed, going to a board meeting, having, that blows our budget that's there, it's already built in. So out of the $2.6 million, there's $200,000 that's a buffer, it's called an allowance, that the board can direct anybody to use and take money out of there to do certain things. We've had clients take it and say, we had to use $200,000 because we found unsuitable soils the entire site, and it just used up our entire allowance. But you as a board approved 2.6, so it's still under your budget. We actually beat your budget because it was a $3.3 million budget. This came in at 2.6. The other reasons for the allowance are if somebody says, listen, we were at 3.3, we got it at 2.6, there's things that we can actually use and get things on the fly when they're out there and the board wants to do, another play set, another area, or upgrade the finishes on some of the concrete and so forth. Those are things that you can take out of there. So out of that 2.6 million, you kind of draw that money down, and that the construction cost from that 2.4-ish number goes up. 2.4, 2.4, 2.5, 2.4, 2.5, it's getting there. At the end of the project, any allowance that you have not used would be credited back to the village.
Okay, so when you say the board is allowed to, that comes to a vote to the board, correct? That's not staff, that's not certain members of the board, that's a vote, is that?
That is however you guys set this project up. So with this project and with the Village Hall project, that's why we had two trustees kind of working on it, there was a time crunch, just kind of getting things done. As things arose, we discussed it as a group, and we have and I know that was a question at the last board meeting about what are the OAC meetings, those are owner, architect, contractor meetings. At those meetings is Anne Marie, Matt's there, JR's there, Mike's there, and then the two trustees, Trustee Bury and Trustee Rogers, as well as our team that we're sitting there doing that. So as items arise, as they come up, instead of saying, okay, Anne Marie needs to take those notes, wait for the next board meeting, get approval, and move forward, everyone as a team kind of just says, is it reasonable? Is it something that needs, it's a huge dollar amount that we're not comfortable spending, bring it back to the board. Or if it's small items like the stone, right? So we were in a time crunch for that stone. This was change order 8, I believe. We're in a time crunch on the stone, just saying the faster we can get in asphalt before it rains, then it's good for the winter. And then we can get stuff kind of done and we can put the poles in and so forth. Chris mentioned that there's critical path items. If we didn't get the asphalt in, if he didn't get the asphalt in, then a lot of the other items were behind it, couldn't be installed. The poles, the fence, the nets, and so forth. So the push was, we got it, everything worked great, the stone was good, but it rained. And then rain just sat there in some of the low spots in the area on the stone and so forth. So we met with the entire group and said, we got some dry time coming up, let's figure this out, what can we do? We talked to Chris and the entire team and said, I can get some of the stone out, and the testing agencies out there, testing the stone and how much it can bear, right? They proof roll it, saying this 10-foot by 10-foot area needs to come out because it's soft. Take it out, put 8 inches of stone. We take that out of that. So we authorize them to do a time material not to exceed $25,000. That is our group as the OAC group said. That's something that we need to hurry up on, go get that thing moving, and then hopefully we can get the stone in and get the asphalt set before winter hits. Unfortunately, they got about halfway done with the stone, proofed roll again, and it rained. So we told them, don't keep spending the $25,000, stop where you're at, because we're just wasting money because it's just gonna keep raining and don't keep doing new stone. So
out of the 2.4, we projected 200,000, it's like a kitty. Out of the
2.6.
I mean, 2.6, I'm sorry, 200,000. Out of this 1.2 that we're estimating moving forward, how much are we budgeting for that?
The
Or is
what?
that-
Always separate items.
what do you mean?
1.2 for these future jobs?
Talking about
No,
the allowance in the active core versus the 1.2.
so the 200,000 will include this as well that we're discussing right now, the disc golf, the open play, the village hall.
No.
Two completely different.
If we were to move forward with these three phases, I think is what trustee Trocchi is asking, how much would we have in an allowance line item of that 1.235 million for these three items? Is there already an allowance in that? That might be line items in these back.
No, we try to build in a contingency. If you were to say, so on this proposal, right, it's $5.6 million to do. If you bid them all out, you do them all. We would sit there and take soil borings and we'd work with our civil engineer and with our landscape architect to say, that area to the north is probably bad soil. Let's add $70,000 there for bad soil. The one that's here next to Village Hall, the soil boring came in good. Let's only add 20,000 just in case something actually happens. So it varies on each project. Sometimes you see between 5 and 10% in allowances and contingencies on a project. So out of the 5.6, you may see $500,000 in allowance if you did this whole project at once.
All right, with all due respect though, $200,000 is out there. We all trust each other. I don't like having $200,000 sitting out there for anybody to just say, well, we need to use it for X, Y, and Z. I understand emergency situations come up, and there's got to be contingency funds. There's got to be a way, without having to go to every village board meeting and try and get things approved, where we feel comfortable that because we put 200, or if we put 250, or if we put 300, you could pretty much bet that that money's going to be used. I want a sense of comfortability.
Yeah. So to clarify, that $200,000 is not an open checkbook for Integral to use. That is something that your OAC meetings, just same as the Village Hall, are attended by no less than 5 people, representing the village. Plus TRIA, who's looking out for your best interest, plus Greenberg Fair, who's looking out for your best interest, plus HR Green. So if you want to take it to the next level, we can say no allowances on any projects and everything goes back to a board level and everything gets approved there.
That's not official.
I don't think that has to do with either. I think what is bringing on some of this stuff is we know that the 2 trustees are there looking out for us. We know that. The problem is sometimes something goes on there that nobody got back to the rest of the village. They have the authority, which we gave the authority to do it, but I think it's a little bit more of a heads up. I mean, so all I would ask you, if at the meetings, because I can't make all the meetings, it's impossible, is just, if you give me a heads up, and then from there I can call the village manager, she can send out to everyone, so there's never a question.
But, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
But with that being said, I guess we did have a policy in place, or we did have a team in place to protect the village, and that's what they did. So having the $200,000, I'm comfortable with the people that we had out there looking out for us. And George, what you're saying is it being reported back to everyone else, but that's the key. Whose responsibility was it to report it back to you? Who's the person? Is it staff? Is it TRIA? Is it? That was really the question. That's something that we can discuss amongst ourselves.
Do you go to all the meetings?
I go to most of others, some I miss because of other meetings.
All right, so if there was a meeting that you had to go to, you could let me know that you're going to go to it?
Sure.
Right there.
Right.
The easiest way to do it, because she can get a hold of all at the same time.
I also want to add, I have to jump in on this discussion because what Mr. Petrakis is calling an allowance, what I've heard it called in other communities is the contingency fund. So I would want to be clear as to what direction we have from the board, because I'm viewing it that there's a base bid of the basic cost for this project, and that $200,000 is that flexibility if there are unforeseen circumstances, whether it's soils or you name it, or weather that you have to deal with. So what you saw, I think was at the last meeting, is we brought what were called 3 requests for proposals, which I view as change orders, plus the $25,000 allotment, which we still need further verification as to actual spent. When I look at and read the village's purchasing policy, and when I sit down and talk to the finance director, I do not view that either myself as interim village manager, any other staff member, or trustee has the authority under the current purchasing manual. So if you want to invest that authority in certain people to be able to have that flexibility to spend that money, great. But when I look at the literal interpretation of that policy, those items, those costs of anything from that $200,000 has to come to you as a village board for your authorization. It ends up on the back end. We're going to make the best decisions of that OAC group for decisions that have to be made quickly because of how things are going to change on the spot. But the ultimate authority right now rests with you. If you want to change and invest that authority in designated people, that's your choice. But until then, the literal interpretation of that policy is that only you can make that authority, that decision.
So that was my purpose of having Jim explain it, get his perception on it, and yours as well, and then discuss it amongst ourselves.
But there was kind of a roadmap, right? You guys used this same process when you did Village Hall, and you had the same type of group meetings, the OAC or whatever you're calling it.
Yep.
And you had a contingency fee or an allowance.
Yep.
How much
So you
is that,
guys-
do you remember?
And but you
Yeah,
drew,
I do remember
It
you
would
said
have been a percentage of the,
X
of what the
percentage.
problem was.
but you drew off of it as needed on, you know, an on-the-fly process to keep the project rolling.
Absolutely.
And so really, I think we're all in agreement that having an allowance in there is a good thing, having a working group is a good thing to protect all of our interests and keep the project on budget and on time. It's really just comes down to a communication thing. And I think we're all guilty of not communicating at some point, so maybe we all just get better at that.
But
And
as
certainly, as the mayor instructed the village manager, you know, to communicate those things out to us. And maybe, you know, just off the top of my head, if we budgeted money within the $2.6 million, we're aware that we voted for that number, and we are aware that $200,000 of that is contingency money, and it's really how do we govern that portion of the money? Because all the rest of it, we have pay slips and things like that to back all of that up. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, I was sitting there thinking that as we were going along, we said the project is 75% done, and really, we've gotten over most of those humps and hills where we're going to have those surprises. We've opened up all the ground that we're going to open. A lot of those surprises are now behind us. So as we go forward, we don't expect big changes, at least you know, coming out of the ground and things like that.
Right.
So if we were to say something along the lines of like, one change order cannot exceed 10% of the allowance, whatever the allowance is. If it's $200,000, the first change order comes in, say it's $20,000, there's a draw off that. Now there's only $180,000 in there. The second one can't be in excess of $18,000, and then rolling forwards. Those numbers are kind of going in opposite directions of each other because you're kind of expecting that you're not going to have those bigger surprises. But in the beginning, you could be hit with a bigger surprise.
But like Anne Marie said, the definition of what that $200,000 is used for, whether it be contingency or change order, right? Is that what you were saying? We need to clarify that definition first before we say who's going to be okay with making those changes.
Right.
Like who's recalling the change order? Is it TRIA? Is it us? I mean, I guess
I think
that's
that the actually situation that's
$200,000.
unfolding in front of these guys. They opened up, like you said, they put the stone down. The stone was impacted by the rain. They come back up, they're ready to pave, and now you've got to fix the stone again.
Right, but what I'm saying is like, say Beth wants a statue of herself out there in Heritage Park. Is she going to be okay just to make a change order because they're on that committee? Or, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see
What is
exactly what you're
considered a
saying. I think
change order?
that's a
What's
change, that's exactly a change order
Yeah.
Right.
versus just an adaptation to the conditions.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, policy doesn't allow us to do any of this anyway, so we need to figure that out first.
You're right.
So, can I clarify for everyone what I've seen in other boards? So you have an allowance, you trust two people, whoever that may be, to actually go out there and represent it. You also trust your staff to go out there and represent it, and you also trust your consultants to represent you. If it's gone that awry that we have a statute of Beth in this thing, then I think everybody needs to, everyone needs to go. I've never seen that situation there. I would recommend, and there are contingencies, and you can have them in the fund, you can say they're completely outside of the project. The difference with allowance, I want to clarify with everyone. If you have an allowance on a project, and I do a $20,000 change order to that allowance, if I make it a change order, Integral or whatever contractor gets a charge as overhead and profit on that change order. So that 20,000 becomes 20,500, 20,000 whatever it is, the 10, 15%. If you draw that $20,000 out of the allowance, that overhead and profit's already built in this project. So it's a flat $20,000 that comes out of the allowance. So it's already like prepaid taxes, prepaid shipping, whatever you want to call it, it's there. So that's when you draw that out there. So when we bring what the contractor brings up as a change order request, like here's something that's going to cost a little bit more money, we will always recommend drain your allowance first and then they can be actual change or official change orders after that. What your policy is, that's the second question, is how you do your policy, how you approve it. That would be something I think you guys would all discuss amongst yourselves and come up with something. The third part of that is bringing that information back to the board. The real intent was, and I'm not part of this, is we have an OAC meeting, we kind of get most of the people informed. At the next board meeting, everyone's being informed. It's a packet, it's a memo, whatever it is. That's for the board to decide how that comes to you in terms of information. They've had boards that have actually asked the architect to come and do a presentation every month. I don't think you want to pay for that either. That's something, there's so many people at this meeting, everyone can inform.
And I would just add that our main mode of communication of highlighting the important elements that are coming out of that meeting is through the weekly staff memo. So we've been highlighting any of the construction elements, including the photos. That's been the main mode of communication. If there's an alternate way, I can gladly, staff can gladly report on it at every board meeting. We will go whatever route you want to make sure that we're fully communicating to all of you.
You know, I think how this all came about was it started when, at the previous village manager, then we went without a village manager, but when this all started, we were told that Mike was our liaison. And Mike ran most of the meetings. So we expected Mike to be communicating back. And then when you came on board, it was, you know, wonderful because it was communicating even more so. I believe that's where the lack of communication kind of broke down. As far as the definition of change order, I'm glad you clarified that because it's been thrown out there that we're approving these change orders. So change orders come with fees attached to them. These aren't change orders.
Maybe I can help clarify the OAC and the intent of it. Now, from a policy standpoint, I think it's a valid point that maybe some of these things need to be cleaned up, right? I mean, that's something that we should spend time on because there may be the potential for abuse, right? I can see where that exists. The mayor and I served on the OAC for the village hall. Identical process to this, right? And so when this project came about, having that experience on that OAC, which really went without a hitch, it was a successful project and we didn't have any of there were headaches throughout the project, but that, to me, that was the point of the OAC. The intent, so as we approach this, that was the OAC I was part of, and we approached this the same way. And in those OAC meetings, I think the point of the OAC and having two electeds appointed to it is to have that, so it's not just staff, it's not just an architect. There are two electeds, unless you're going to post and make them all, you have to limit it to two, as you all know. So there's two electeds, but the point, I think the intent, right, was there are decisions that are being made as part of the construction process that if we have to wait 2 weeks for the next board meeting to approve a $3,000 change order on adding gravel to make sure the pavement doesn't crack, that's inefficient and only going to draw, and you're going to have contractors. That's the intent of making some of those. And I think as we sit here, you're talking about decisions, handrail, right, which was in my world, again, can this be cleaned up? Sure it can. Handrail and some of the issues with the handrail, no brainer, had to do it, right? The gravel, well, I guess we can go and we can risk pouring and risk cracking concrete, or we can pour gravel. Kind of another one, no brainer. And I'm not dismissing amounts here, right? Because I think at the last meeting, and unfortunately at that meeting, I was out of the country on a family vacation. I would have liked to have been here. I would have preferred if it was tabled, that the two of us weren't here so we could talk about this at the front end. But the intent, we're talking about dollars that amount to less than 1% of this project, right? So did we add basketball courts to a project because we decided we wanted to add basketball courts? No, we're talking about gravel, a handrail, and maybe some more gravel. Right. So what I'm giving is the background of OAC. We went through the process as part of the village hall. We went, and that's how we approach this, right? And and what I'm saying is, that's the intent, is you can't at times on these projects, and I've only learned this from being on these, you can't wait at times 10 days, 2 weeks to make decisions on $3,000 worth of gravel and things like that. Now, communication or cleaning up the policy for the ability of abuse, all valid, right? Hasn't been necessary, and I think there's a trust factor here, and I think maybe that was the issue. But that's the background on the OAC. That's the intent of having 2 electeds as part of that meeting, so some of those decisions could be made in a time-efficient manner.
No one is knocking the OAC or the committee that was put together or how it was handled. I think the issue came about, and the reason we didn't table it is because it just got brought up, and I think there was many of us that were unaware of these OAC meetings, how it got appointed, how it came about, what was going on. The bathroom was this, and the ski hill was this, and or the sled hill. There was just so many things that was thrown at us in 1 minute that I wasn't going to say, let's table this, because they're not here. It just got brought up, conversation just kept taking place. So there's not a trust factor.
No,
I can honestly believe you said it seems there's a trust factor.
No. I mean, there is not a negative trust factor.
There's a good trust factor. I trust the staff and the electeds that were there. I trust everything that you guys were doing. I just feel that their communication was handled poorly. I don't know who, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm not saying it's anyone, not putting the blame on anyone. I just feel that, especially being the parks chairman, I feel that I should have been especially notified of what was going on. Even if there's a $3,000 change order or a mistake or whatever we want to call it, I think there's clarification that needs to be handled. Definitions need to be, verified. I mean, there's just so many things. I just feel like the ball was going here, there, and it just all came up in the meeting. So I think that the way it came out last time, maybe be considered poorly handled, but there's things that I feel a little hurt about that I was not aware of. When you're saying a $3,000 change order for a handrail or for a stone, fine, we get it, that sort of stuff happens. But I think as things go on, for lack of a better term, mistakes or errors that are made or unforeseen circumstances, those things should be brought up to the board to say, hey, we need to make $10,000 worth of changes here because this is put in the wrong spot, or this is not, the trees need to be removed, or something. I think that should be brought in front of the board.
And that was the intent of the 28th meeting, right? Absolutely.
Right, but a little heads up prior to that meeting would have been nice, just to say, okay, now I understand why. Because I talked to Jim for over an hour, and he explained everything to me, and everything was great after that meeting. If it would have happened before that meeting, maybe that wouldn't have happened before this meeting.
And you may be absolutely right. I'm saying I came from the process of the village hall, right?
And
in which we
the
made
village
decisions
hall,
bigger than
And that's the
this.
thing, the village hall, when you brought that up before,
Yeah.
I was notified, and I wasn't even a part of the village hall. You called me, George called me, I had staff, Mike Martins called me, everybody called me when it happened with the village hall. With the parks, with this year's park, I didn't even know what was going on.
If I can recommend, if I'm hearing this, so between Mike and Anne Marie are giving an update, somebody's giving an update at the board meeting level, that probably should happen at your parks. Because you have a parks committee, that somebody should be giving that update at your parks committee. So you're up to date in terms of meetings, the change order requests, all that other stuff. And I'd even go one step further if you actually want, because between Greenberg, Faro, and Tria, we're out there twice a week giving field reports and pictures and so forth that you guys can actually take those and send them to whoever you need to. The entire board can take them and read them. Sometimes they're long and boring. We also have meeting minutes from all the OAC meetings that staff has, everyone has, that you can share that. You can share that with everyone. Those are all public documents that are there and discussing it. And each one of those are pretty clear in terms of what is the submittal process, what's delays, how's the schedule, and so forth. So everything's in there.
Yeah, I would think that all of that should be shared. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever going to accuse somebody of giving too much information, so.
I agree.
I will attest that, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, we will discuss that too. You can't get too much about that.
Trustee Rogers has probably seen way too many emails between staff and which one call going through construction wise. Your head's probably spinning.
All right, so here, where are we going with this? Because looking at this list, we still have,
Well, I would like to echo Trustee Troike's statement and sentiment that, you know, I trust the electeds, the staff, even our wonderful contractors implicitly. I mean, I know that everybody's looking out for our best interest. I really do.
You missed me on that.
Happy birthday. So, you know, I mean, these things are, like you said, I think we've all agreed that it's coming down to communication.
Sure.
There was nothing untoward now, you know, that shouldn't have been done or hadn't been done before. Like you said, there was already a roadmap in place. that you were just following the same thing because you had success level using that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I did it as, I think, my own view. If, with all of the things going on in this village and the fest and the, do I want to know about every gravel $3,000? I don't.
Right.
I don't have the bandwidth for that, right? So, and that may be on me. So that's the, but that was the scope I viewed this through. This wasn't $100,000 changes. This was gravel. This was handrail. So admittedly, but that's the scope that. I know we say you can't have too much information, but I can tell you through this process, the emails are flooded, and most of them don't require action from me, right? And so you start, the level of emails has only increased, and I'm more, send me things, Brian, you need my action, right? So for me, again, this isn't our full-time job, right? We all have real jobs, and if we did this and managed these things at that level, this would be a full-time job for any of us. So that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I'm saying that's the way that I view this of, I don't think that I need to know about, and again, that's not saying it's right. I'm just saying, explaining of why I think at this level of this percentage of this type of project, these weren't things that I'm going to call and say, hey, today we said we're going to throw down $5,000 of gravel to stop the potential cracking.
Again,
Not right or wrong. I'm saying that's
Right. Again, I'm emphasizing
that's-
the handrails, the gravel, that sort of stuff. I get it. That stuff's gonna come up, it's
Sure,
gonna happen.
sure.
I'm talking bigger issues.
And
So on those
right,
things-
so moving forward, that would be something that sure, but none of that's happened to this point, right? We're talking about stones and nothing outside of anything.
But overall status of the project,
Yeah.
it was in almost every staff memo that I would see, pictures, updates. It was aerial, shared with the board. So I felt like the board was being updated on the status of the
I'm
project.
not talking about the status, I'm talking about other issues that have been brought to me right at that meeting. I heard ski hill, I heard bathroom, I
Ski
heard,
Hill's on here to talk about today, though.
I'm talking about the last meeting when I came into the meeting.
The
Sled hill, sorry.
Yep.
I'm saying, it was at that moment I came in and heard about it. Did not know anything else about it prior to. I'm just saying, if something of that nature is an issue, is holding up something, or that it's gonna be costly, I think we should be notified. And maybe it was dramatized, and maybe I'm making it too much, but that's the way I'm taking it.
Yeah, I don't think
So
it was
that is
wrong.
why,
Right.
no, see, that's the communication part, is I heard there is. That's why I'm saying, if we can have some sort of, and it's hard, because we all can't be in the same room talking, we all can't be on the same email, can't be on the same phone conversation, it's hard to have clear communication of what's happening. So that's why I think at a board meeting, all these things need to be discussed. And
But even weekly, because I agree, it's all communication. It's just like when I walk out of the meeting and somebody says, what happened to that business they closed?
Yeah,
I have no clue. I don't know.
those are the things I'm talking, maybe things are being too dramatized because it's hearsay and this and that. I think a board meeting, so we have the facts, the logistics.
Well, not just the
everything.
board meeting, everything. We should all be talking. If something comes up, spread it out, if I give it to Brian can give you give it to Keith. It's just, it's putting it out there for all of us to be on the same page.
I understand, but.
So I guess moving forward, they want to be, and after the meeting that neither one of us were at, and they said they want to be kept informed, I told Mike, make sure you're sending them all these emails, so hopefully you've been getting all of these emails since that last meeting, because I can't send them to you, So I said, Mike, they obviously want to get these 10 emails a day that are going back and forth between you all, so make sure you're sending them to them, because that's the form of communication they'll get. Besides, Anne Marie's been sending out, since she's been on board, sending out these updates. In addition to that, then that's on you, Mike, to start sending these things out to them. They want to see all the stuff, and you got to send it out to them. And I told them that after the last meeting, I wasn't aware that you guys wanted to see, because there's a lot of nothing.
No, I just want to.
And again, I'm gonna, no, Sharon, because I'm not done yet. I'm emphasizing not I don't need 100 emails a day. I'm talking big changes. And maybe there's not a big change, and like I said, maybe it was dramatized, but when I hear that there's a big change, and there is, I want to be notified.
Right, and you would have been if there was.
Right,
Okay, well,
when
then
you
that's
find it's
clarified.
big, $3,000 here. Or,
Yeah.
and that was another bone of contention, was that Anne Marie said she viewed those 3 change orders cumulatively. So she was not looking at 3,000, 6,000, 5,000, she was looking at
And again, that's
$18,000 and
change
say, wow,
orders.
this is going
No
above and
fees
beyond.
attached to them, so it's not change orders.
No, I get it. Like I said, I'm okay with the fact that we approved $200,000 worth of contingency money, and we approved, tacitly, we approved having 2 electeds and the OAC, or however I'm forgetting that acronym. We've been on board with that. I mean, I know that there are certain of us who are saying that we didn't know about that. I knew about that OAC almost from the beginning. I don't know how, to be honest with you. I don't know if it was brought up in the committee as a whole, where we don't have a tape to review, or, I don't know how I knew about that, but I knew about that.
Every meeting is taped.
Not
meeting
not
is
big, but
Yep.
video?
Committee of the whole? Oh, no, audio.
Yeah, I don't, well, I don't know those. I mean, I'm just saying that
Sorry.
they're not on our
Since this is a
homework
workshop, I
plan.
just want to clarify something. I have 2 staff memos that supposedly are informing everybody. And on these 2 separate staff memos, A, there's nothing mentioned about the bathroom being installed in the wrong place. There's nothing about the trees being removed, that we just agreed to pay for what somebody else did not identify. Furthermore, there's a note on there saying we've received all the documentation for pay estimate number 2, and that is not true.
Well, we did discuss it with the company today, and they should be here tonight. So we'll address it. But I want to get through this, and we still have executive sessions tonight.
Well, we actually skipped around. The first one, I think we went to one of the last ones.
So the spot they were actually on was schematic design for the future stuff. I will give you a brand new project authorization with accurate fees on there for your consideration. Is that everyone's understanding?
Is that too much to ask for?
No, not at all. That's an easy
The
one.
status of funding, we already went over. What construction phase services should be provided by TRIA? Well, let's get the schematic design from them, then we can go with that. All observations,
Wait,
That's a whole separate subject.
yeah, that doesn't have to do with the schematic. That's the future contract. Are we changing the 2015 contract that we have with them for future contracts, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so with this particular item, from the experience of what we've seen with Active Core, the recommendation is that we draft a professional services agreement that serves as the master development agreement that oversees oversees any other agreement such as the AIA contract. There are very specific issues that we've seen that we need direction from or that would be incorporated into that issue. One of the specific examples is the very next item. Does the board want to continue to allow observations, or do you want engineering inspections as part of the project, and if so, who? So these are some of the issues that we would clearly identify. What is the responsibility, who's doing what, and who's doing what when? So any of the ambiguities or any of the issues that we've seen identified at the staff level through the OEC meetings, we would want those clarified, very well specified in the document. That's the point.
But don't we have a document that you created? Professional services?
As a template or no?
I'm trying to think of the 2015 one. Is that?
There was a 2015 contract with TRIA.
We do.
That was our master.
Yeah.
That was our master agreement
Alright.
back in 2015. That was agreed upon in 2015. That underneath of that project, we did the village hall, and then we did a little bit of work for the EMA building,
That's,
and then underneath that, we did active core. And I do want to touch on this subject because obviously that means opening up the master contract and doing all that stuff. But if there's concerns, which one of the main ones are that we've been kind of talking all along, is the difference between observations and inspections on a job like this. We've had different thoughts, and if that is a miscommunication or confusion on what we want to do or what the board wants us to do or staff wants us to do, and that changes our main contract, I'd like that to be discussed. I mean, it's on here for us to do that. And to make clarify this, so under TRIA's contract as an architect and even as a landscape architect, we are allowed to do what the insurance company says. You're only doing observations. You cannot do inspections. You're not digging through things. You're not opening stuff up. It's just a word of terminology that's there. But then there's also a difference between your projects that are actually here on site, which I think where some of the confusion lies. The active core site is a park site, and then you have the ring road that you've done, Heritage Circle, and the 319 grant. Those are done more with the grants, MFT funds, and so forth. IDOT jobs, street jobs, if I can confer with that, IDOT jobs are all done on a time and material basis not to exceed. So every truck that comes in from a contractor, somebody needs to check off, said there's 30 cubic yards of stone, here's the second truck, here's the third truck. So if you watch 159th Street, there's somebody sitting in the car, probably by themselves, waiting for the next truck to come. Somebody's doing those inspections on that IDOT job or any of these jobs. That is a civil engineering inspection because you're required to, correct me if I'm wrong, to, as that contractor wants to get paid, he may say, I delivered 10 trucks of stone. Your civil engineer, that you can confirm to also, is your civil engineer comes back and says, I was there that day, you only had 8 trucks. You're only getting paid for 8 trucks. So they're paying for somebody to oversee this project, and it's all time and material. This project, the Village Hall, was done as a lump sum project. We got Troop as a contractor, they gave us a lump sum bid, and they were in there to do this. We provided observations weekly, we met weekly, or every 2 weeks, to see what their progress was and to make sure that they did the project per the drawings and specifications. If they didn't do something, they rip it out, and it's on them. We didn't watch how many carpets, tiles they delivered, we didn't see how many gallons of paint they bought, or how much concrete they poured at the bases. So there's a difference in terms of what you actually want done at each one of the job sites. Active core is a lump sum job. You have $2.637 million to have Integral do a complete job. It's our job as consultants to make sure that they're doing that on a timely basis and that they're doing this and they're providing the things that we have for specifications. And if you want full-time observation, there's a different, that inspections, I want to clarify, is probably more of full-time observations where somebody's out there looking at Integral, doing things daily and doing reports and so forth. I would love the work. I got no problem with that. Our team would love the work, but you don't need it on this job. I want to be very clear on that. And that's taking work away from us. But I want to be very clear because I think there's a miscommunication of who's doing what and what level you want. If the board decides that, you know, because Mike is used to the IDOT jobs and some of the site jobs, that he wants full-time observation with somebody out there, you had your choices in there in terms of you want to do it in-house, did you want TRIA to do it, did you want an outside source to actually do that? So
I want to jump in here because of any of the items that I've seen go to the OAC meetings, the one I can most strongly recommend to you proceeding forward on anything that involves any type of civil engineering or any future work in the park is you want on-site engineering inspections. When you're putting a bike path down, when you're putting any hardcore, when you have trench backfill, you don't want to assume that it's being done correctly. You want an on-site engineering inspection done to confirm that it is being built the way that you were paid to have it built. It is totally your choice as a policy decision, but if there's one thing you leave with tonight, it's a strong recommendation from staff that there be some type of engineering inspections. Maybe it's not the full court that Mr. Petrakis is identifying, but there needs to be some type of civil engineering inspections for some of the work that will be done in your subsequent phases.
Is that for standard on these types of projects?
no.
All right, I'm going to ask Director Selmowich if he can identify one of the issues that you saw on the site design and what we identified and what we had to do moving forward with Active Core.
One of the issues that we had found was in the plans there was an issue. This was brought up at one of the meetings regarding trench backfill. Anytime, and this is standard procedure, anytime you're doing any kind of storm sewer, things of that nature, what you want to do is under any hard surfaces, concrete, asphalt, things of that nature, you don't want to just put the dirt back in. You put in what's called trench backfill. So basically you're putting in stone underneath there, and you put that all the way up to the top, and that's to help so that you're not having the settling issues. And typically the requirement is you put it in for the width of whatever that paved area is plus 2 feet on either side, and that's standard procedure. If you're not doing that, over time you have the potential that there's going to be settling and obviously the cracks, things of that nature. So we had brought that issue up. The issue, apparently there was a missed detail or an incorrect detail on the plans. So that was added to the project. And like I said, that's a standard procedure. I know it was brought up that, if these inspections are part of roadway projects, we did the same engineering inspections for the various parks that we've had constructed. I mean, there's been things where And we haven't done full-time inspection on those. We did part-time inspection. And I tell you what, we did find a lot of things that were being missed, incorrectly installed, things of that nature that we had to have redone. And I'm not saying on this project specifically, but I'm just saying in general, that there are a lot of things that we had to point out to the various contractors. Hey, this needs to be corrected. Hey, this is the stone is not the correct depth. For the Air Hills Park, we had permeable pavers. Well, they were filling in the permeable pavers with stone. Obviously, that makes it not permeable anymore. It's supposed to be a granular, a fine granular mix. So we required the contractor to remove all the stone and put new stone in and make sure that they're doing it correctly. So there's a lot of things that it doesn't require full-time inspection, but you do have to be out there kind of checking things, making sure are they doing the pavement correctly? Like I said, are they putting the proper stone underneath the aggregate base, underneath the bike trail? You certainly can't find that out, after the asphalt is put in place. So you want to do, sometimes you do depth checks. Sometimes you just make sure that these things are being constructed in accordance with the approved plans, in accordance with proper construction techniques, things of that nature.
Mike, when you say we, are you referring to staff, yourself, or hired engineer?
We've done it both. For a lot of our projects, we have hired engineers to do that. For the first phase of Heritage Park, HR Green did the inspections for that project. For the 319 grant portion, HR Green did that. For some of our drainage projects, we've had also Christopher Burke doing engineering inspections and observations, things of that nature, making sure that what was in the plans is what is being constructed. And in other cases, we've had staff, myself or other members, go out and do inspections and make sure that whatever is supposed to be constructed, make sure that it's being done in the correct way, make sure that we're getting what we pay for.
So
That's one and two.
This engineering part isn't part of our contract, so what he's asking, or what Amber's asking is, now do you want to add that onto this contract? Do you want to add an engineering, somebody come out and check it? Do you want to say, okay, we're going to put that in-house, like maybe I'm a new engineer we just hired, that'll be her job to do? Or are you comfortable with how it is, right? She's looking for direction. You want to change what we have now, because this is not what we contracted out for now, and add this extra layer via an outside engineer, civil engineer, via in-house Mike or I'm sorry, Catherine, or are you comfortable with where it's at?
Or Mike or Catherine are qualified to do this?
I don't know, Mike.
Well, I've worked on IDOT projects, I've worked on tollway projects, so we definitely are.
And they've worked on other projects.
So then they should proceed before just like almost like when we pull a permit on somebody pulls a permit on their house and you pour the footing before you can pour the concrete in. These guys have to go out and look at it, right?
Yeah, I just want to add too, we can't be out there, the expectation of staff looking at it is we're almost expected to be out there all the time too. So they consider that our limitations as far as our time in order to be out there.
Sure.
But that's why when we pay for, engineering oversight of these things, we pay a fairly substantial amount of money all the time on these projects. And because it is almost full-time, it's somebody sitting there, whether you're pouring that road or you're installing the slant wall for the ninja course, the guy's still sitting there, right? So do we get to some hybrid situation where, I don't know, like, are there planned days when you're doing trench backfill and that's when you need somebody there and it's only on a demand basis, or how do you manage that?
Well, those are only inspections. Like you're doing routine inspections. You're not sitting there for the whole job.
No, we wouldn't be sitting there for the whole project. And as an example, like I said, in other projects, we were just doing part-time inspections and find quite a bit of things that, we needed to point out and make sure that this was changed, adjusted, corrected, or whatever. And that was just part-time, by staff.
So you're saying you can't handle this? You can't take this on? That's not an option?
We can certainly do that. I think the recommendation, just because of the load that we have right now, It might be a little tighter, but it's the board's, it's, if the board
Well, I
decides.
guess I'm asking you, can you take this on? If you say take it on and you're gonna save us the expense of an engineer, then, I mean, that's the way I would say, well, then, take it on. So I'm asking you, can your department take it on?
At this point, my recommendation is that they hire an engineer.
Okay.
We, just with our current workload, and it's going to
Totally
get
understand.
greater.
Okay.
We're not going to be able to do, we can certainly do some, but we're not going to be able to do that.
So if we were to revisit the master contract and go instead with a PSA, can it, there was always the option on all of these, there's the third or fourth is always an alternate option. And it's an alternate option to keep the option open that we want to certainly reserve our right to send out our staff engineers to inspect anything. And if we can, if time permits and we have the staff to do it, and if not, then on our end, we would hire an inspection firm.
I mean, it could
Because basically, I mean, does your firm do this, or would you just be contracting that out?
So for the active core, over there, our firm, TRIA, we designed the pavilion, right, the gateways and so forth, right? So we'd be out there watching them, erect them, and put them in, put the bolts in. Lori, her staff would be looking out there, looking at all the landscaping, all the bushes, the shrubs and so forth, all the paths and so forth. And then Ted's firm, HR Green, who did the main project, the circle here, and did the other one, the 319 grant. He was only contracted to do mass grading on the site. So as an engineering firm, he would only be looking at mass grading and making sure that this guy, that Integral brought the table up, the mass grading up to a certain level. So it would be a combination of all of us going out there and looking at it. But I want to really clarify, it's not a simple answer, because what Ted or a civil engineering job would do, somebody would be out there more than just part-time. They'd be out there doing a lot more. I would consider what we're doing out there, because we're supposed to do one observation a week. Green Brick Barrel's doing one, TRIA's doing one, so we're doing two. And the intent of that is, it's not set times, right? Green Brick Barrel's at a set time to go and look at it. TRIA's time is all supposed to be random. Because you're right, there are some contractors that will be out there and they may do something that's there. And Mike, if I remember when they did the permeable pavers, you came afterwards and found that that stone was there. Nobody was there on site to catch them while they were doing it. So that's how our process works. We'd actually go out there while they're doing stuff and we look at it. No offense to Integral or anything, but any contractor, as you're going out there and they still got the excavation open, you're like, that's wrong, that's wrong. You go out there some days and they're pouring concrete. Other days they're forming rebar. Other days they're putting stone for the whatchamacallit. You try to catch them at random times so that contractors are on their toes and they're looking at that stuff. That's our job. If you do want more than the once a week that's in the contract or twice that we're actually doing, where do you delineate that? If you're only out there, say, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or for 4 hours, and you know you have the set times, if I was Integral or any other contractor, I'd be like, well, the day that they're not off here, let's put in 300 linear feet of trench and backfill it with soil. So you try to be random about it, and you also try to cover all of those portions. So to be true, like on IDOT job, somebody would be out there 40 hours a week, looking at stuff when the contractor's out there. And if he's out there on Saturdays, which they were doing this, that somebody would be out there on Saturdays. And again, it's work, it's dollars. I want to reinforce that. I'm fine with that. Anybody wants to give us more work that's there. I'm being honest with you. And Lori, we had a big conversation on this. None of my jobs have we had full-time observation or inspections. Lori's jobs, all the landscaping ones, they have not had full-time inspections or anything that's on there. So that's how these projects actually work. I want to just really clarify if it's an IDOT job versus something that the village bid on.
And what we're recommending is staff is not full-time on-site engineering inspection. It's part-time. It's when a particular project is being done, the contractor is contacting the engineering firm to say, hey, we're pouring this pathway today. So then they send out an engineer for that period of time. So it's not having someone out there and paying for a service that's not being used.
Especially hidden critical pieces that are.
And since we've used HR Green before, why couldn't we use them on a part-time basis if there's something major, like another path being done to make sure the right stone or the depth, if our staff was not able to address it?
Well, the problem there that they were saying is, because this is going on too long, what they were saying before is, if you want someone to come in and check it, then you can find another construction company to do it for you. When they've been doing a good job there, if you have to babysit someone, then they shouldn't be doing it. It'd be like someone coming in and checking my cars. I have to make sure they're 100% before I put them back out. That's what, with them owning a business, I'm sure they're going to be doing the same thing. Question, is there a warranty on the work?
Yes, sir.
If there's a warranty on it, and something breaks down the line, you're going to fix it, because I'm telling you right now, if you hire someone, you're not going to catch anything if there was something. So,
Not only is there a warranty, don't we keep our 10% retainage for that 1-year warranty period?
No, not during that period.
Not during,
As soon as they close it up. But they do have in the contract, which is kind of unique to Tria's contracts, is within that year, if you find something that is settled or done something, they have to repair it. That 1-year warranty starts anew at that point. So you start fresh. So you start doing that warranty over.
you do it for the specialists as well.
Yeah, and that's the other point, I guess. You, as a side contract, you've hired a testing agency that's out there testing stone, testing compaction, right? It wasn't Tria that told them that you need to replace some of the mud in the tennis court and replace it with stone. That is a certified testing agency. That is an inspection agency that's there with their equipment and seeing that it's compacted enough, that's the right stone, that the concrete is the right mix and so forth. They're doing that. That you are paying for that as a separate inspection that's there. That's who's instructing them to do that. So your concrete is poured to that test, to those specifications on the drawings. And then the rest of the team goes out there and verifies that. Again, spot checking. And I think the question is, how much spot checking do you want? Do you want more spot checking? You never catch anything unless you're out there 40 hours a week or every hour that they're there and you're watching like a hawk. So do you pick a certain time? Do you pick a certain morning? Do you pick certain hours? That would be the question that you want.
Chris, you figure you're going to be able to start on this in March, right? So we got 3 months that nothing at all is going to happen. In 3 months, we can send someone out there to take a look and see what held up after the first winter. So how about we switch the discussion now?
The only question that I would have is because this discussion about what Tria services are during construction is leading to opening up the master agreement or having another master agreement for Tria architecture. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that if we did something wrong, we'll tell you if it's there, if it's a different services. I think the open cut, the backfill underneath the path, that was like Lori's here, we can discuss that. That was like a standard detail that you use for a regular job. I think Mike had asked for the IDOT detail to do a little more belts and suspenders on there, which we did, and it was part of the drawings, and they complied with that. So if you're not opening up the master agreement, then I'm fine with not even talking about this. I just want to make sure that if there's something that I've done that the board wants to look at it and look at everything moving forward, please let me know. We can talk about it.
I'll go back to the master agreement. I strongly recommend a master agreement to be able to delineate any of these issues or any follow-up direction you have to address one of Trustee Rogers' points or questions of Village Attorney Hanson. There's a draft professional service agreement structure that I have had in place in multiple municipalities that I've served that I want to sit down and review with him to see if it's a good fit for here. It's just the purpose of a professional services agreement is to protect the village. It's a standard agreement that you'll be able to use short-term as PSA for any other types of professional services, whether it's hiring an engineering firm, an architectural firm, any type of firm. The goal is not necessarily to reopen and renegotiate any of the previous terms, but to more better protect the village on some of these issues that have arisen.
Okay. So were observations sufficient, and should inspection be required where it's set on there? Should the slide hill be open for public 2018, 2019? Is it safe? Is it muddy? Is it access available?
Well, George, it said, Mayor, it was the dispensing that's all around part of it. Plus, it's been seeded, so chances are we might have to redo that in the spring if it's open this season.
What's
I'm
on
not
that?
sure
What
if
has
that's
to
a
be
good
done
idea.
to do it? And is it feasible for them to use it this year? I would say if it is, and it's not going to cause any damage, or it's not going to hurt any kid because they got to climb over something to get in there, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but if it's not ready, then it's just not ready.
I mean, it's as far as ready, it has, the problem that we talked about, John and I talked about is, it has the seed blanket on there, and we thought, well, kids are gonna go out there, and they're gonna go on this anyway. They're gonna see it, they're not gonna get our permission, they're out there on Sunday, they're gonna go see it. But it's not something that we wanna encourage, because the seed blanket has the stakes in it. John, can you speak to that more?
Yeah, one of the things that we talked, there's like 6-inch metal spikes that are holding all that seed blanket in place. And if you were to tear up part of that seed blanket, you might pull some of those metal spikes out, and then as you're sledding down the hill, you'll have metal spikes. If we leave it set, then the spikes are supposed to deteriorate, and the same thing with that, that seed blanket's supposed to deteriorate, and then we'll have a better grass. Now we know that there's going to be a certain amount of grass every year that's going to have to be, or areas that'll be reseeded or whatever, which is not a big deal, but we're just worried about that, the blanket with the metal spikes on it.
Then I would say no.
I'm wondering why at the July 25th meeting, we all kind of, the consensus was to not open it. Why are we even, I'm right, what's bringing this one back up?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then the answer is no.
Especially given that if we decided to go against what we already knew in July, it would be costing us upwards of $33,000, $30-some-odd thousand if we damage it.
I would say this is one of those issues of being born. Communication.
Yeah.
Right? To talk about it. We've discussed the OAC. These points were made. I think we said at that time, it seems to me the same thing. I don't know why we risk it. But I don't know that kids in this town are like, you know, yeah, I just don't think it's to that point yet. So if it's iffy, I think the question is, there's no way to really just close the hill unless you attempted to fence off the whole hill. So there's still going to be kids component to this, but I'm not sure we do the full sled hills open, maybe put a sign that's closed, whatever it may be, but it seems to be the prudent.
Can we put some sort of sign up?
Plenty of
for
signage.
safety?
Yeah.
You need plenty of signs that said it's closed. We've had another village that,
Sledding
that
hill.
sledding hill that was closed, that a young girl was hurt when her sled ran into the no sledding sign, and those got sued anyway.
Yeah.
You said the spikes are metal or plastic?
Metal.
They don't disintegrate, they don't disintegrate, they're not
They
metal
just get buried in the
disintegrating,
ground.
they just disappear.
It's a U-shaped, or it's the one that's got a V-shape and it's got a pin?
It's got like it's a coil on the top, and then it just goes down in the center and as a spike. So
Right.
we're just afraid that if the mat gets pulled back, then it would pull the spikes out.
Right. And just so, because you're saying it deteriorated, I put some down at one of the houses, and that was 7 years ago. They are still there. So I would say that no, the spike should be pulled out before we let the kids go down the thing and they tear up something.
I don't think you'd ever have anybody tear that out though, so we're on the same page. Nobody's gonna do the entire 319 grant or the ring road with all the seed blanket. I wanna make sure expectations are there that wherever it may be, unless JR is taking that task to pull out all the stakes.
All right, are we done with Sled Hill then? All right.
What is the answer on that? You just
No.
No,
You're not putting fencing up? No.
no, just.
No,
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 Well, you already
it's,
said there is some fence out
There's
there.
like orange fencing, but it doesn't go.
Put up signs.
Yeah, definitely signs. Put them up in the front, put them in the back.
It's around that.
So that is,
No, I'm talking up front, opening the gate.
The front of the property.
I want it up in the gate so they walk in, they see it, they get by the Sled Hill, they see it.
At that Swallow Cliff on their sledding hill, they put the fencing up at the top too to prevent people from actually sliding down.
So let's, John, can we do that? Put some, we have any other orange fencing we can see at the top?
There's not one side to the hill, you can slide down.
Yeah, I mean, we
the
can,
side of that hill.
It doesn't really.
we can put, there's really only 2 points to enter it, because the 319 grant, their fence is still up around the entire 319 grant, and the only entranceways are on the path. So if we put a sign at each entryway of the path, it would say sledding hill closed.
You still taking on the barbed wire? You see where I'm going with this?
Well, I get it.
Traffic will go up there.
So, I mean, if you guys want us to put a snow fence around the bottom of it, we can.
Whatever you just said, I think the signs and just blocking the entryways is enough, but I would say add whatever the Because that's it.
If we don't get snow, they will slip.
You don't know that. Should the rain garden be relocated?
No.
No.
Okay. Should portions of the fence around...
Wait.
I'm the only one here.
I said no too.
He's voting.
Rain is here. The only issue that I've heard with the rain garden not being moved is that if kids go through the rain garden, then we could be in trouble with the grant, or no? If that's not the case, then
Yeah, that's, the EPA has no stipulations. The stipulation is that since we got grant funding, we have to keep the native plantings for a period of, a minimum period of 10 years, but it does not stipulate that you cannot enter it, you cannot enjoy it. In fact, I believe that they would actually encourage that, because the whole point of the native plants is to get in there, learn about it. There will be educational signage, things of that nature, so.
okay.
Did he get all those points? I believe so, and I actually kind of building off that, Logan Gilbertson with HR Green. We're installing educational signs near this rain garden, near the wetland basin on the north end. It actually will tell people what they're seeing as they're walking along the paved path there. So, yeah, Mike is definitely right. It doesn't mean the area is no trespassing zone. It just means that we can't convert it to turf grass. It needs to remain as the total site had just over 26 acres of native plants and wetland plants, and we need to maintain that to be in compliance with the grant.
Okay. Should portions of the fence around Heritage Park be removed?
Yes.
Where are you talking on Heritage Park? Because all the people that live around the golf course, they don't like the fences taken down. Now, barbed wire, yeah, but are we planning on, because I believe those are their fences.
No, I think you're talking about access. When you were talking about, you were saying you were taking down some fencing over here by the football fields or something. We're not talking about taking anything down around behind their houses. I think it's something about cross access with getting from east to west.
Okay. So the fence that surrounds that is township's fence, correct?
I believe it's their
All
fence.
right, so let's talk about the
I thought it was
township.
all, why would the township put barbed wire on it?
No.
I thought it was all.
No.
Are you talking about the fence that goes along
The perimeter fence around the property.
Talk about the east, north, south.
Yeah, all it says here is fence around Heritage Park removed. If you're taking down the barbed wire, the people will be real happy.
Oh, yeah, we're doing that. I mean, we've already instructed staff to do that by end of the year or
But the
January.
fence that goes around the property lines, that's, in my perspective, it's staying. The fence that's between the village and the township property, there was a discussion of removing that fence.
And where they open it up for homecoming.
That's the village's fence.
That's a
See,
village's
when I was on
fence.
township, I was in the.
No, wait, that's not what Pam said.
No,
Yeah.
the fence
See,
that,
that's
the
what I-
fence that runs along this side is, well, we're taking the barbed wire off of it, it's our fence. I mean, it's the exact same fence that goes around the whole property.
Right.
Is it the
Why would
fence
the
that you
why would
took
the
down
township have put barbed wire on their own fence?
That's why I'm saying, I'm pretty sure that was all part of the golf course property.
I just think we need clarification from the township first before.
And I said the same thing, I think we should have a discussion, because I know that their concern is their fields,
Because I know
and
they
they may
do
not
not-
want people crossing back and forth, so.
I have heard from many residents at Woodbine West who would like a portion of the fence somewhere over there available to get to the park, because they don't want to walk all the way to the front of the township property and come this way.
We've had those discussions at the parks.
Oh,
Well, the
okay.
problem that you might have on that is people own the property, so you might have to.
Yeah, I'm
But
not saying
you
do
can
anything.
you can come out of Woodbine West on the footpath to the concession stand at the ball fields, and then there's still a footpath that comes around and brings you up between the ball fields and the football field, which is a natural place to ligature into the village property and pick up our trail. I mean, this really has to be looked at holistically. Now, it would be nice if the township would give us their opinion on that as well, tying those two things together. And that's not necessarily a building project, that's just being a good neighbor and being efficient, and saying, you know, we're all serving basically the same residents and the same constituents. Let's make this, let's make this work.
Some residents were
that was
asking
some-
to have their private property, the fence removed, so they can have access at our parks meeting. But we actually, we need.
You're right, they want to put a gate in
On
their
their
backyard so
private
their kids
property.
can go in and out.
Well, if it's their property, I don't see why they.
That's a liability, I would say it's a liability for us.
Yes. And my concern is to, if you, not to remove too much of the fence, if you're gonna do a little open between township property, because you're gonna open it up to snowmobiles, dirt bikes, you never know. You don't want easy access too much.
But with that said, you can put bollards in places.
Right, we can put up, just like the farmers and the golf courses do, they put up sections of bright orange snow fence on green stakes to, you know, kind of chicane those open areas to keep people from doing it.
Yeah, you don't want cars.
These two things were discussed at the Fest Committee meeting. One of the things was, even if we took that fence down, we would have to put a fence back up for the fest, because that's the back side of the carnival in that area. The other thing was that walkway. Mike DeVivo had talked about working with the township to put a pedway across, and then we had talked about making an entrance there. We have a temporary entrance open in the fence now, which we opened up, of putting a permanent entrance so you could walk between the two, and then that's where the people from Woodbine West would come through, and then that's where, if it worked out with the township, with the fest, where people parked over there, then they can follow the paths and the walkway and everything and come into the fest site.
You gotta be careful, because it's 50-50 over in Woodbine. 50% of the residents want it and 50% don't.
Oh, I know, that's why I said that's way above my pay grade, but I'm just, you know, these are things to discuss.
If you open it up where you currently open it up, it's just a matter of encouraging people in Woodbine to take their path out of their subdivision and come into the township property and then cross over.
Right, but it's not, but what Woodbine residents are saying is the access they have to the township property right now, it's not just for Woodbine. Everybody parks there and accesses it from there. That's the problem that they're...
From the Woodbine subdivision.
Yes, that's what they're saying, is I don't want all these people coming to my subdivision to walk into this parcel. And that's what the residents that don't want it.
It's your village streets, though, we can't keep people on parking.
I'm
Those streets are walking in the park. I live right across the street from a park, people park there all the time and walk into the park.
I'm just saying, that's what they said. I mean, carry either way, but...
So, I like the idea of taking down, certainly this hunk of fence right up front here on 151st Street, the whole lot of it, I'm good with. I get John Robinson's concerns about ATVs and snowmobiles, and I think that's something that any large landowner in our area deals with, and they deal with it. We see this pop up all the time. We see snow fencing in the winter months pop up, you know, little pieces, and if we have to address it that way, I just think it's a park and we don't fence it off from our residents. I also think that part of the fence over here from the very front where it starts, going at least as far back as the library property, should be gone. Now, we can talk about it beyond that, you know, after that, it's kind of like, I get it that there's a football field right there.
And we just gotta find something to design.
Yeah, and really maybe get like, even just like a pencil drawing of what we're talking about, because I get, you know, lost.
Yeah, we can do that.
So if you could just pencil something out and saying this is, then we could kind of mark up that, you know, Keith, you could say this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
This is what you're thinking.
And then we can also see exactly what you're talking about and where.
And if it's ours. How do we find out if it's ours? How do we?
The township says it's theirs. There've been plenty of meetings. They've
Right,
said
but how do we
it's
find
theirs.
that out? Maybe Eric, maybe that's a question for Eric. Are there going to be?
There's got to be a survey.
Yeah.
When we just bought it, when we just bought the property, it's going to be on the survey that we
Do you
just
think there
had.
would have been a bill of sale when we sold the water system over at IW too? That's interesting.
The survey for
But
the
this is
purchase,
only just a little bit.
the survey for the purchase should show, easy for me to say, any fencing or anything that, whether it's on the property, whether there's any encroachments, anything like that. So that should be reviewed. I just need to get a copy of the survey.
We also should have a discussion with the township, because if we take ours down and then they decide to push it off, then
I'll call it tomorrow, so I gotta have a discussion with them.
that's good.
All right, anything else on Heritage Circle, of the fencing?
No,
Nothing?
you're going to get us a drawing and then we'll talk about it later date.
How should Heritage Circle be lighted?
Lights. No.
Big, bright light.
Well, it's perfect the way it is.
I mean, the way it is today, I drive through it probably 3 days a week at night because I enjoy the drive actually. It's relaxing and that lighting, I still can't see past the curb very far, so I don't know that it's really excessive.
It's not excessive.
That's just my opinion.
Is the smart lighting in
Is
there?
it what?
The smart lighting.
We don't have the software yet from it, but it is controllable lighting, yes.
Okay.
Is that smart lighting software, is that part of the initial buy on all of that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not looking to spend more money by
Nope.
getting that, we're just waiting.
It was all
we're just catching up.
supposed to be provided. We've talked to the contractor. The contractor is just talking to the manufacturer. They're the ones that do the software, and they're the ones, when we did all the specifications for the lights, they were the ones that were going to provide that once the job is complete.
Okay, I just want to read a part of this and then read my notes to you guys. It says, this will allow village staff to control brightness and switch off individual lights. The lights can range from 70 to 100 watts. Staff is seeking direction from the board on how Heritage Circle should be lit. I wrote in my notes, would you entertain dimming or turning off individual lights in neighborhoods, like in front of someone's house if they ask?
Can we do it?
Yes.
Not another subdivision.
No, not in other subdivisions? No, we can only do that here.
No, I know we can only do it here.
Right.
But we own the lighting in, say, my subdivision or anybody else's subdivision. If I called and I said, you know what, I have a light in front of my house and I'd really like that turned off. I noticed that you did it out here on Heritage Circle. You turned off every other one. Would you do that in my neighborhood?
No, safety.
No, we don't have the ability to do that.
So
We have
that's,
the
so that's the
ability-
reason that I don't like that.
Do we have the ability to do it in on Heritage Circle, if that's a public road?
We never got the answer to that.
I mean, the lights were, obviously, we paid for the lights using MFT funds. They were designed to IDOT standards. I mean, typically with any, as you had mentioned, typically with any other road, we don't turn off lights, as part of any other subdivision. So whether anybody's going to come and point out, or question if we did, I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, policy with other subdivisions, we don't turn off the lights.
Is that road going to be open now, or is it closed?
That is a public road, so
It's
it's the same thing as any other subdivision, any other road in the village. It's a public road.
Okay, so you cannot turn off the lights?
We have the technology to do it. We
Right.
will have technology.
And
It's a
can we
matter of-
legally do
Right,
that?
by IDOT standards, what's the minimum threshold? And if we turned off every other one, would we still be in compliance with?
You probably should not for liability purposes.
We'd end up in jail with that.
Now, we have the ability, we have the sky thing.
Our staff?
Oh, the stargazing.
Stargazing. So, I mean, if we were to have certain events out here, if you had
I'm glad you said that, because my next note says, by ordinance only, we should turn off certain lights as identified for specific times for things like Homerfest or stargazing.
things of that
By
nature.
ordinance only, though, not leaving it to some, up to anybody.
But can we
For a
legally do
specific time.
that?
That's how I'd like to see it.
Can we legally turn off the lights for stargazing?
If we shut down the roads, maybe.
Can we shut down the road if it's a public road?
It's all.
No.
Before starting.
Yes, you can. They shut down the road.
We shut down roads for the parade.
No,
Watch
can you
parties.
turn the lights off though, once you shut down a road?
To me, this seems like,
I have to
the
look
whole
into
thing
this.
seems like a potential solution in search of a problem. Right? I mean,
Well, I just don't want people to get the impression that we can just turn off lights if we
They're
can't.
not that bright, I think it's pretty dark out there in the first.
yeah, these are not, I mean, these are down facing, I think it's, I
Unless these
think
are
Carlos' point,
sewer
right? It's
dwellers,
lit, but
it's
it's not, yeah, I mean.
Now, the lights meet our current lighting ordinance. They're full cutoff. The color meets the 3,000 degree Kelvin. So that's it.
If I can add something, I would ask if you do change something to let our team know, because remember the next goal, we weren't lighting that much in active core, and we were going to see how much light actually gets thrown from the street. So if you're lowering that or doing something, then we may have to adjust something in active core.
Has everyone seen the lights on at night so far?
Yes.
Everyone's seen?
On the Ring Road?
I mean, do you think they're obtrusive? Do you think that they're too, okay, are you looking for brighter or just less?
No, I'm not looking for anything. I just wanted to know what the legal aspect was. Can we turn off the light? No, yes
Keith,
or no?
are you okay with what's out there?
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled with what's out there. I would just, like I said, I would like to reserve by ordinance that we can turn them on or off for specific things like Homerfest.
If the,
You know-
if the attorney says it's a valid.
Right, absolutely. If we were, and if we were gonna close down the road and can we turn off certain ones for certain specific events, you know, maybe stargazing, maybe Homerfest, we're gonna do the fireworks back there. Imagine then you're sitting there, and I mean, we're encouraging people not to sit on the ground. Look out, a down-facing light is right in your eyes.
Right.
So.
All right, and I agree that we can find that.
But again, I would like to see that by ordinance.
Sharon must have a hot date tonight.
All right, Mayor, in the interest of time, there's two other items that we're seeking policy direction on. So the next one, I'm going to turn over to our village attorney, Eric Hansen, to explain waivers and payouts. And Attorney Hansen, if you can kind of give an overview, like the definition, explain what we're talking about, and we want to see if we're following the direction of the board or if you've changed direction. So with that, I'll turn it
Are
over.
these add-ons or these aren't on here? The next two things?
No,
This
these
is under number
these
9.
have been added. This is under 9.
Are there any other issues or concerns the village board would like to address?
And to that, one of the issues that's come up in terms of like the waiver, like the subcontractor lien waivers, and how they impact the payments. And it's an area of maybe some confusion, maybe there's some uncertainty. And at a minimum, there's a difference of expectation between, I think, the general contractor and the village, and we want to make sure we get the right direction. I want to back up here for a minute. It may seem very basic and rudimentary, but to explain, first of all, what subcontract and lien waivers are, and what are they, and how do they affect things. So, when you're looking at this, the village contracted with the general contractor to do the project. General contractor, in turn, subcontract some of that work out. Those subcontractors have lien rights for the work that they do. Meaning, if they're not paid for the work, they can file a lien against the project. Now, in turn, when they are paid for the work, they provide the village with a waiver of those rights to file a lien. It's a lien waiver. I mean, it's a document that says, we're foregoing our rights against the village and against the project. So the big question is, and this is the area of uncertainty, is when does the village require those lien waivers? The one possibility is that this term is called trailing lien waivers, is how we've been referring to it. The general contractor provides the lien waivers to the village from those subcontractors for the prior payment that's been made. So for example, we're at draw number 3 right now. We would turn over a check for draw number 3, and in turn, we're getting those lien waivers for past draws number 2. So there's a bit of a gap there, but that's the view on, in a short and a very simple way, that's a trailing lien waiver. So we pay draw number 3, they're providing all the complete lien waivers based up till draw number 2. Same thing, draw number 4, we would pay that. The general contractor would give us all those subcontractor lien waivers for draw number 3. The other view on that is current lien waivers, in terms of requiring, if we're going to pay draw number 3, we need to have lien waivers in hand that says all of these subcontractors have been paid up to date right now, based on draw number 3, even though it hasn't been paid out yet. So, I mean, there's pros and cons on both sides. The village hall construction was done under the trailing lien waivers, and that's the expectation that the general contractor has, is that this is a trailing lien waiver project. So what that means is the general contractor does not have to go out there and pay all their subs first, and then turn around and get the money back from the village. So like I said, there's pros and cons for both. The trailing lien waivers, which is the preference of the general contractor, is there's flexibility for the general contractor. The con is that I mentioned before, that there's a gap between that funding. So the village puts out the money, it doesn't yet have those lien waivers up to that point. Now you do have the payment and performance bond of the general contractor. You do have the idea that there's additional work being done up until this point that they haven't been paid for. So we just kind of want to open it up for your questions, because again, under the contract itself, there's some language in there that references trailing lien waivers. There's some language in there that says the village has the ability to decide whether it's doing that or not. So we had a call with it the other day, just yesterday, and trying to figure out a solution, because I think this has been a point of confusion, as that, or uncertainty for the board and from staff going forward in terms of how are we going to do this, or what's the plan, what's the process. So I guess at this point, maybe I open it up for questions rather than maybe continuing to talk.
I'm used to current lien waivers in the business that I'm in, but it's at much smaller scale, which makes more sense for that, and I can understand why we're in trailing lien waivers, and if that's the way the contract was set up, it is what it is.
No, and that's a good point. What I've seen too in larger contracts, and I would suggest is at a minimum going forward, whether it's this project or future projects, saying, let's use an escrow. Let's do this. Generally, it's going to cost you a few $1,000s to have this done through a title company. That way, what happens in that situation is the subcontractors, they provide their lien waivers to the title company. They're held in escrow. Money comes in, the title company pays all the subs, and the contractor pays all the vendors, and everything's done. It's wrapped up in a nice, tidy little bow.
Similar to what banks require on some of the
Exactly.
construction projects.
That is not the case now, but I just wanted to get
But we have the protection that we never really get beyond one payment.
Correct.
And while that one payment is, while we're waiting for that catch-up, like you said, they're still performing work that they are funding that we have not paid for. So even if we got into that catch-22, where we didn't get, we got to that next payment and they still hadn't fulfilled the obligations under the previous one, we wouldn't make that next payment, and we've got work that is basically unsecured because they've done it, and they're certainly not going to go to the payment following that.
Correct.
We're going to come to litigation or something. At that point, it's going to stop. So we're never going to get beyond one payment out.
Correct.
Is it ever a feasible option, I'm just asking the question, this is ignorance, because it puts the general out a lot of money out of pocket right out of the gate if he has to pay those subcontractors. Can the subcontractors ever in the future invoice us directly and we pay them versus going through the general contractor? I know that's more steps.
It is, and that's one of the things. And the general contractor, we brought that up in terms of paying some vendors. We brought that up on our call yesterday, and I think rightly so, some of the concerns for the general contractor is, well, how does this look that we can't pay our own bills? But from the other aspect, if you're doing it in escrow, that way it's recognized that the title company's paying everybody. That's a no. There's no issues there. For the village to do it, we suggested that there may also be situations where a general contractor may not want to get it because they're getting a discount, or if it's paid by a certain date.
Sure.
And if they're relying on the village to do this, it may not get paid on time. So that comes with its own. It wasn't ignorance, but it does come with its own pitfalls as well.
Can I ask like a for example? Okay, so like say, pay number 3. Work has stopped out here for months. So we give pay number 3, we pay that, but now we're waiting, 4 months, or there's no time frame there because maybe the next pay number 4 is not going to be until March 8th. Or 4, well, say 4 and then go to 5. Yeah, 4 to 5.
Yeah,
So I mean, now you have a huge gap.
Well, I think
before you get the information.
Well, before you get the lien waivers, yes, but I don't know in terms of when you say it's a huge gap. If there's work being done, I think that typically these are on a monthly draw. In fact, the contractor writes usually it's a monthly draw schedule. Now maybe it goes a month or two. Maybe there's a gap month where it isn't.
Well, like the winter time, everything's dead, stopped for months.
We haven't even got rid of 3 or 4, and there's probably a 5 right behind it, so then we're starting again.
Which presumably they're getting smaller as they go because they're just doing in-house cleaning.
Okay.
So that you're right, that last one we might be out for some time, but presumably it would be small. Earlier we had mentioned that you think that this project is about 75% done. Does pay estimate number 3 or 4, does that put us at, if we were to pay those, does that put us at par with that, or?
45%. They're currently asking with number 4 up to 45%, correct? Or is that 3?
3.
Pay request number 3 asks for up to 45% of the project, and they're 75% done.
Draw number 4 will get you to 69% progress bill.
pay
So there's
40,
30
which we haven't seen that. We
Right.
haven't seen that, you guys might have that.
I had it on here, but it's on the schedule that I had on Eric's.
I think we forward that to everybody this afternoon.
Yeah, if you want to know what.
I think that, to that point, I think what you're saying is, so at draw 3, they're asking for payment for 45% of the project.
50%.
But as of- or
With it
50%.
being 75%.
Well, right now, it's actually
We're
75%.
still-
We're 35%.
We're still ahead of the
We're
game.
still ahead of the
Right, I mean.
Plus retention as well.
Plus retention.
Right.
Yeah, so for the board members that don't know, if we paid Integral $1 million, we hold 10% retainage on that $1 million. That is something that the village holds on to until the end of the project. So you're holding $100,000 on that $1 million. That's there. That only gets released at the end of the project.
So I've seen it both ways. Obviously, as an attorney, my preference is always, hey, you should be safe and you should do it current, like you were saying, or you do it through escrow. But I also understand in this situation where if there was an expectation by the general contractor, and also the general contractor didn't think, hey, I'm going to dish out $700,000 and float
Right.
that until I get paid.
And we would have bid it out based on that, and you would get different contractors bidding this, you know what I'm saying? Because
Or we'd have
it's a-
increased costs because, let's face it, nothing's for free. They're gonna bake that right into their estimate. Just like, and my preference is that I'm comfortable with the trailing lien waivers right now because I think we have two forms of protection at minimum in this. One is that we never get beyond one payment out. And the second is we still have the performance bond that backs that up.
And the
So,
retention.
And the retention and retention. But I'm not comfortable then saying, and kind of to what Trustee Burien said earlier, this is a solution in search of a problem, or vice versa. I can't remember exactly what it said. It's like, why would we go to escrow and then pay increased costs that would be on our end?
Because you're saying that there's some risks there. I found in my experience, exactly, but what I found in my experience is that the safest approach is not incurring lien waivers. Because you're right, yeah, there's a performance bond, a payment of performance bond. And I've had to fight with an insurance company for over a year in a situation where this happened and you're fighting, you got increased litigation costs and the insurance company's pointing at you and saying, hey, you were to blame as well. So I mean, I'm just saying, safest approach is current. There is a little bit of, there's some risk there to doing trailing lien waivers. And I just want to make sure that everybody went in with eyes wide open and said, if we're doing trailing lien waivers, first of all, making sure that everybody understood what the difference was. That's first and foremost. And then secondly, saying, this is the direction we want to go, and we're comfortable with that, knowing all sides of it.
Sure.
So
As long as we know we're getting all the backup trailing liens in the original version, that question came up before. We know there's a performance bond in place. If these things are all in place and we're getting, certified payroll, whatever it is that we're requesting, as long as we're getting all those documents.
Yeah, we've been very clear as we approve it. Make sure checks don't go out until you have the waivers or whatever it is that's required. So at this level, we've been very clear on what we expect before the checks to go
Two
out.
things, the surety bond is not fully
Excuse me.
executed. Just so you know.
I'm sorry?
The surety bond is not fully executed, just so everybody's aware. Secondly, it's right here in the staff memo that we do not have documentation.
Do we have
And
documentation?
it's stated November 14th, we didn't get it until the 28th. So check number 2 did go out.
Then that's on staff, because we directed the staff
I'm just-
not to let anything go
wanted to
out
clarify.
until they had everything they needed. So why that went out, I don't know.
I just wanted to clarify.
On the 14th, Trustee Suisse said to you, do you have everything you need? You said, as of today, I have everything I need.
And
So that should have been on you.
we were told by Tria that we had all the information.
She asked you, do you have everything you need? And you said, as of tonight, I have everything I need. If you didn't have everything you needed, you should not have came within that time.
Do we have all the stuff tonight?
Waivers we draw on to
That's for 1 and 2.
originals, yes. Certified payrolls current through draw 4, which is,
Did you bring the stuff for 3 tonight?
no, that's trailing, that's the trailing center.
But it isn't a page.
If you decide on trailer.
Right, but they said that they had some of the stuff, I think.
Certified payroll, right?
Certified payroll, and I think you said you had 6 waivers because you paid for them out of your pocket.
We didn't bring those, we usually submit a complete package, so we're not giving you disjointed half
filled half-complete documents.
But what you had given us before was also photocopies, because you didn't bring the originals before, because you're bringing the originals tonight. So if we want to work on this, the way our lawyer just got done telling us, we'll go with the trailing waivers, but you got to bring photocopies of what you have, and then you also told us that it would be 2 weeks and you'd have the rest of them for us.
So we draw 3 funds, we then take that money to pay ourselves.
And then you can get the rest of them to bring to us.
So a check is not issued until you have the original package. It's not, this is a prisoner exchange check for original.
All right, that's where we're at.
So we do have all the waivers and documents you need to release draw 3.
All right, so you have all of 1, all of 2.
Yes.
Okay. Jim, did you see them yet?
They're in his hands, I didn't see them. So,
All right, so
I've seen PDF copies, those are originals that you need.
Forward the way it has been structured so far.
So we would give them the check now for the 3 because it's going to be a trailing waiver. But they did say that they had some, and I'd like just to have some, if they have some, I want to see, get copies of them, so we do have them.
I thought you want the original.
I would say that's where I think
Well,
we
here, the
don't
originals-
want copies, right? We want
Well,
originals.
no, we really don't want the copies, but the only way he can get the originals is he's got to get the check so we can pay the guys to get it back. So if he's got something on hand, I'd still like that.
Copies in lieu of original until we can get all the originals.
And the originals we talked about, and he said that we should be able to have it within 2 weeks.
So we're on the same page. This is originals for draw number 1 waiver package. These are originals for draw number 2 waiver package.
And if I could just add something.
These are just originals of what you already have copies of.
So I think what just happened is exactly what happened the last time when Mike said, Tria had told me we had everything that we needed, and that's exactly what happened. We just got, right? Is that what happened? Because you were saying as of that day when we asked.
As of that day, I had requested from Tria, do we have all the documentation? And I was told, yes, we did.
And that was in order to distribute payout number 2, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you did, I mean, basically, we had everything at that point.
We had.
You just got your originals. Village gets original
Because
waivers.
he can't get the original until the other one was paid.
When you say the word "we," you're saying, when he says "we," it was in his possession, not your possession.
Correct.
Okay. Clarify
Okay,
that.
that's what I'm saying.
So Mike, listen, I owe you an apology because you have the right to give them that check, right? Because he can't get the originals.
Yes, and that's what I want to clarify. It
Okay,
sounded
then
like
I
he-
apologize, then there was a miscommunication again, I apologize. You had the right to give him it, there's word that there wasn't the right, communication, word on the street is, we didn't have the right to give that check out, but we didn't have the right, so
Yeah.
please accept my apology.
So we're very clear on this process here. Pay request number 1, the original waiver is only from Integral. That waiver is just from Integral. He gets that, and he turns that in, he gets paycheck number 1. He uses paycheck number 1, he pays his subs for that, he gets trailing waivers. So when he applies for pay request number 2, he's giving you waivers for number 1. So we got PDF copies that comes through our office, originals come here. Originals come here. Originals are there, that this is what was missing from that portion, is just saying, we now have the originals.
Do originals not come through you?
No.
Okay, so this is an issue for me then, right? Because we talked about this earlier today. Are we handing checks before we have originals in hand?
Well,
No. Is that, I know that's occurred now, and I only learned that today at 2 o'clock. But is that how we've traditionally done this?
No, I mean, on this project or other projects?
Yeah, in general.
In general, we should have everything in hand, yes.
Originals in hand before you hand the check. Why didn't that happen?
well, all right, because now you're working, what are you talking about now for what project?
This one.
No, I just witnessed originals handed over.
Right.
Well, these are the ones for 1 and 2. We had, originally, we had, when payout number 1 was approved without any of that documentation.
Approved, right, but the check wasn't handed over.
No, well, payout number 1, the check was approved to release without the documentation.
Because it's the same thing, they have to get the money.
Oh, all right.
Everything is
It's the law.
2.
Right.
2, should we have originals before we hand the check?
Well, 2, we would have had, yeah, 1, but now we've got 2.
No. 2, did we have originals
And that was the information
In order
that,
to release that check.
and that was the information that I requested from TRIA, and they said we did.
We did
No,
not.
but we're saying it doesn't go to TRIA. The originals don't go to TRIA, the originals come here.
We get PDF copies.
I would have to
We release-
verify that.
We
But how does
release,
it typically work?
we release a check on PDF copies, and then we get the originals after the check.
Because they have to pay for it.
That's what I'm trying to get to
Yes.
here, because that's not the way that I heard this. Is that true? We release a check on PDF copies.
Number one, we didn't have any of the information. Number two, I would have to verify that we had them in hand.
I have a packet right here, we don't have the waiver in it.
I believe we just got handed them right now
Right, we did just get twos. That's what I was trying to explain.
to pay three.
We didn't have a
To pay
copy,
three,
we
yeah.
had nothing.
All right, no, we just got the originals
Right,
for
and we didn't have a
tonight.
copy either.
Well, all right, but
I'm asking, when we handed two, the check, did we have originals in hand to release the check?
Not for two, because they were trading.
We had originals from number one, but.
Yes.
obviously
So we don't get the
not
waivers
because-
for two until after we.
should have had originals from
Number
number
two.
one, but we didn't have the originals from number one either. So, all right, but
Then why did we
if,
give them twos?
This is what I'm saying.
let me just explain it real quick, and it makes sense once you get it done. One was done, they came over it, and we, from my understanding, we got copies. Okay. Then from there, we gave them the check for it, they went out, they paid their bills, they got the subs from their, well, actually, the first one wasn't even subs, it was just you guys.
It was suppliers, subs.
Okay.
it was.
So then, we were supposed to get twos, we didn't get twos. So when we didn't get twos and we were giving them the check, I said, well, they don't get any more checks until we have all the signed waivers. So now tonight, and they had it, they just didn't bring them in. So tonight they brought in first payout and a second payout. Now, we have all the papers we need for first and second. Now we're going to give them the check for the third one, and we should have the papers within 2 weeks. Because now he's got the money, that's why I said, I want some of the waivers that he has right now, because he's got his own waivers from the company, and he said they had to go out and pay for, I think he said 6 subs out of his pocket. So he would have those. He still has a bunch of subs to go.
I don't have an issue with the trailing part at all.
Okay.
I think that's the part that is, I think we've thrown a wrench in the program on the trailing to try to make it current, and we had a meeting earlier today on this topic. I'm trying to just understand, because we're talking originals early today, and it's part of the reason why now we're talking current, and if you're on pay 3, that check, do you have the originals for 2 in hand?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we just got.
I got it. No, I'm asking, the process, is that how that typically would, that check?
That's how it should work.
Okay.
With the trailing, yes.
Okay, has that happened in every step of this process so far? Just to simplify it.
No, because one was received without anything.
Okay.
Because it has to, right? Because you have no trailing yet. You have to make
Well, we
it.
had the
And what else
one, we had the one from Integral itself.
Yes, there's a main overall
Right.
waiver with every draw that's always current. So you cut us a check for $791,000 in draw 3. We've already received that original waiver that says you, village, has paid us $7.
Right.
What we're collecting for you is the second and third tier waivers that we have to go pay
Right.
these vendors and collect, and that's where the trailing scenario comes in. Our waiver is always current, the overall. Certified payroll is
The
always
thing
current.
is, though, on pay request number 1, you had no trailing.
We had
Because
Right.
you had things that you were out, but you had no way of collecting that paperwork yet.
We had
One,
one
we all
overall.
agree
Right,
upon, but 2
No.
was the issue.
Right.
When-
2, not at your level, at our level, we're trying to figure out, okay, we got number 1, we got nothing. Number 2, how did that process go out? Because we want to make sure we're consistent. So number 2, you said you had everything you needed.
From what
But they're photocopies or PDFs.
we received, yeah, I checked with TRIA, and according to TRIA, we had everything that we needed.
Okay, Mike, is that how you typically handle that? They say they have it, and you hand the check?
Typically, I mean, this project is totally different than any of the other projects we've done. Typically,
Not the village hall.
well, I wasn't involved with the village.
Village hall was all trailing waivers without any of these hitches,
Yeah.
without any of these problems.
I wasn't involved with that project,
Okay.
so I couldn't answer to
Okay.
how that one was. As far as with all our other construction projects, the originals, everything is submitted. We actually do current waivers on the other projects that we do, construction and so forth.
If I could just clarify too, the reason the originals weren't delivered but two, we had an OAC meeting 2 weeks ago. That check was handed over at that point. There was an ongoing debate for 3 weeks over a certified payroll.
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why. Otherwise, yes, we always exchange the original package for a waiver with a client. That's just the facts. And then we came to an OAC meeting, we got handed the check, we didn't have them with us. Now, we delivered a little.
That's my question. I'm still not clear on how 2 went down. I remember the conversation. I was here for that pay estimate. I remember trustee Sweets asking, do we have everything, saying, I got everything today, and the check was issued, right? And I want to make sure that was true, and if that is typically how we handle this. Would you take the architect or the middleman, for lack of a better term, says they have it, and the check, is that standard? It's a question. It's not accusatory. It's a question. Is that how we typically handle this?
Well, as Tria was they've been hired as the project manager, so if they're telling me that they have all of the documentation, then I'm taking them at their word.
Okay. But the originals never come through you. Originals come to us, right? We're clear on that?
They get a scanned copy of that exact package verified, because there's only one set of originals.
But the actual originals.
The actual originals come.
PDF originals.
They come for the check.
Okay.
Those are like your bond, those are legal documents you should keep, and it should go straight to your hands.
That's what I was going to say, we should have these things.
So obviously, so at this point, you've received all, what you've turned over right now are the original subcontractor lien waivers through pay number 2.
All waivers, ours, all waivers.
Exactly. So now that we have those, if the board, just make sure that we're all clear in there. If the board is saying, yes, we're okay with trailing lien waivers, Mike would be authorized then to give a check to the general contractor for pay number 3.
Correct.
We get to number 4,
We get all
all those, anything that's outstanding at that point up through 3 needs to be turned in originals to Mike before he can release the check. Okay, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. Whatever happened previously, you guys are good, okay.
So what do you want to do?
So going forward, we're going to
Sure.
continue on with trailing waivers. You're not going to change the contract. I don't feel comfortable at all changing the contract in the middle of it. In any other format, especially since it doesn't sound like these guys have done anything wrong.
3 is what they'll get us.
Right, so the mayor is saying, so as of tonight, he should be able to get, he got his check for number 3.
Correct.
Because we have 1 and 2, so he should get check
But that's
for
been the
3.
bone of contention
Right.
over the last several weeks that has caused, I
Right.
think, what the heartburn, right? Is that there's been a discussion, and these are the questions I had earlier with staff and mayor, was there's been a discussion, or there's been a change here to talk current waivers in the middle of a project, right? That's what threw me for a loop. Now, I was told that twice there's been board direction on that, that we were shifting to current versus trailer.
That was me. I did that because we were told we were going to get the papers for 1 and for 2, and it never came. I call probably every day asking, did we get them, did we get them, did we get them? No, no, no. Hold on to the $792,000 check until we get them, because I can't give it to them until we get.
That's still trailing though. That's
Right.
But we were
But
under the
all right,
impression,
but the only reason we decided to go current is because if I didn't do it at that point, they wouldn't have given them the check.
Well, I guess my point is, in the meantime, we've had a contractor in the middle of a project that, as far as I understand, I asked this question earlier, we've had no complaints from subs that someone isn't getting paid, or someone has been, in my opinion, run through the mill, and as I said earlier today, this is part of that situation that makes, at times, the reputation of Homer Glen difficult to work with. On true, hold on true, we did trailing waivers, right? Trailing waivers throughout without a hitch on that, never talked about current, never had problems with subs. The problem with Troop was at times, and we were in between village managers and there were other, but we were slow to actually cut the check even after all that was done. That's a reputation that we start to.
We wrote this check in November.
Yeah.
And I told them at that time, give me the papers, they didn't have them. So today when we talked and Chris was there, Chris says, I have them.
Yeah.
Well, if you would have brought them in, we could have eliminated all this.
Agreed.
So it was just a miscommunication somewhere to where, right now we're where we should be.
But I hear it's gone on for 3 weeks, and that's what I'm saying, with what I'm told is direction from you, but board direction that this was discussed at A&F in a board meeting.
Well,
I don't have a recollection.
But A&F, I did not make the one, I was at a council of them, and it was approved at that point. But wasn't it?
I went over the minutes. We didn't even have a discussion on that. You guys were there. Did we just talk about changing this? We did not talk about it.
Well, all I know is that we didn't have the papers for one, we didn't have the papers for two. Both checks were out. I said, before we give three, we're getting everything we need.
That's trailing waivers.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely,
And I
no
don't
problem.
problem.
You could only
But the only reason I stopped at that point is because we were told we were gonna get them. I still didn't have one. And then I didn't have two. Well, I was gonna put three up until I had one and two.
Sure.
And that was talked about today.
Yeah,
That's great.
that's the process.
There was a lack of communication and whether.
Can I clarify here? I think the question is, at some point, at least staff had told us that we went from trailing waivers to current. That threw off this pay request and application. And I want to clarify that if it did or did not happen, because when we talked to Eric, it was if board already directed us and we're going back to go from trailers to current, and now we're going to make this decision now to go from current to trailer, is that another board direction and that has to happen at a board meeting? I don't want it to go for another meeting or anything like that, because that would throw this whole thing.
No, I think what it was is just miscommunication. And Jim and Chris, I think you would agree with us. If I told you I'm going to get you this, and I didn't get you this, and then you still gave me a check, then you told me you were going to give me this, and I didn't give you this, don't you think you'd hesitate before you did it the third time? Because right now, you've got about $500,000 of our money that we don't have anything proven, anything was done. So that's the only reason, and like I said today, if you would have come forward and said, here, I got him, it would have been a good issue at that time. I would have said, give his check. But I'm watching out for my residents. You're watching out for yourself, which, that's your business, that's what you should be doing. But right now, it's right where it should be, and there is no miscommunication right now. We're giving him the check for the third payout. When he comes in with the fourth, we're going to give him the check for that one if he gives us the remainder of check number 3.
Absolutely.
And we'd be absolutely fine, and we will stick with trailing waivers.
So nothing's changed. That's what's crazy about this. An hour later, we're all.
Well, what has
what
changed,
we've been
though,
doing
what has
for-
changed, though, that I'd like to point out is at the 11-14 meeting, we all had this sheet that had 2 big hunks of yellow highlighter in it, which doesn't say anything about changing a policy direction. This was part of a pay estimate number 3, and in there were a few words that if you were smart enough, and I don't rise to that pay level, to figure out that this was changing from a trailing waiver system to a current one, and that this was going to cause all sorts of drama and all sorts of turmoil to this project.
But it also.
But if this had been explained to us back then, I know I was here for that meeting, and I would have said, whoa, we don't change. I've never in my life changed a contract in the middle of it. Even if I got to the point where I said, I'm getting the short end of this, well, shame on me, finish it out and make the best of it.
Well, no contract was ever changed. There was no papers switched over saying.
According to this says that we're changing direction, going from trailing to current waivers. And again, I was not smart enough at the time to know this. Even Eric knows that some of us probably still weren't on board since he was trying to educate us tonight. And the fact that we approved this pay estimate and we didn't even realize that we were kind of backdoor changing a policy, that's not the way to do things. We don't put policy decisions on the 3rd page of a pay estimate and let everybody find it on your own.
One other important point real quick is that I know you're talking about number 3, and I totally agree. That check should never be handed over ever until that's done. What we're missing here is I was told today there was a board direction that began at the A&F meeting on October 3rd, well before we're talking about. So this going to current board direction thing, October 3rd at A&F, which is what I was told today, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
That was October 3rd before we're ever talking about. So this move to go to current versus trailing waiver is well before this last check.
So
And that's what I'm saying, and I was told that twice now there's been board direction, and I think the second time now was what you're referring to on the 14th, which I was also at, which the motion was a simple approve a pay estimate, and then that
And
conversation
approve
transpired.
payment of which one?
3.
It just says a recommendation, it doesn't say it's changing policy.
I think ultimately, what when we went over it at the
This is
beginning.
being now used as board direction.
Correct.
I think
And
there
that
was
led to
a
a discussion with an attorney, and that led to 3 weeks of this, what I consider to be nonsense in the middle of a project that continues to give Homer Glen a name, a reputation of difficult to work with, which, at the end of the day, in my world, forget about the trailing and current and the difference and the issues there. This is at times why I think on this project, the number of bids, and there's a premium that we pay for having a reputation being difficult to work with, in my opinion. And this only contributes to that. The slow pay to troop on the village hall, with no issues on trailing waivers, but we were slow to cut checks. This is what contributes to that. And that's why this issue, I think more than most, gets me agitated, is because that board direction, I was told today, started October 3rd at A&M.
Chris, when did you have the full master waivers? When did you have one, when did you have two?
One was immediate, again, that's just our overall waiver.
So, but you didn't give it to us until tonight.
The trailing waivers.
The trailing waiver, so that goes.
No, not the first one's not trailing, because it was only his company.
But yeah, so that's kind of just a bill. That's not no trail or anything.
All right, but when did you give us what we wanted, which were the signed waivers, not copies? When did you give those to us?
Your original waiver.
The originals for draw one, right.
Tonight. So that's where the confusion got. We're being told we have them, we don't have them, so we're stopping it because we've already given them 2 checks.
Then we shouldn't have
We're
given them a
paying
check
on
too,
top.
I think is what it's coming down to.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is they didn't have what they needed, then they should have gotten a check too.
You're
Well,
right.
we were told we had it, that's why we released it.
And you don't do that unless you have it.
Right.
Because they don't get it, so why would Tria say, yeah, you have everything, if Tria doesn't even get the original?
Well,
The original comes here.
Jim, did you tell them that here's everything you need? Because
He deals with Nick in our office, so I can't speak to that, but I'm sure if they release that, Nick says, here's everything that came through as a PDF. Our job is to sign off on that with pay request, and he signs off. So
But like you said, the originals should be in our possession because those are legal documents that we have to hand to Eric to go fight our corner
And I
when
agree.
somebody sues us.
But it's
Because we don't
water
have
at
it.
this point.
Here's the bottom,
Yes.
exactly, here's the bottom line. Just to make sure that we're clear, the village board's direction to staff is trailing waivers are fine.
Just the way we're doing it.
Just the way that everything that the contractor was under the impression of. Again, a lot of this would be short-circuited as well. My recommendation going forward, if you have any large projects, you do this through an escrow. You do it through a title company, there are no issues, there's no risk, and everything's taken care of. You're not going to have this discussion for an hour as to when did you get this payout, when did you get this payment. There's an escrow agreement that's in place that if the documents aren't there, there's no payment. And it falls on a title company who's paid to do that.
So somewhere there was a misunderstanding, but it was stopped to where we didn't give out, because they voted to give us $731,000.
More confusing.
So wait a second.
I 1,000% agree
Yeah, you
with
did
you
the right
doing
thing,
that.
100%,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
saying this predated, the original direction from the board from A&F was October 3rd, before any of the things you're talking about. So at some point, there was a discussion, and I keep hearing from people that were at A&F that this discussion didn't take place, is what I'm hearing, where there was direction even from A&F, because I said at a board meeting, I certainly don't remember giving that direction. I was never part of a trailing
Do you remember
current
changing?
conversation.
So, Mayor, can I
I-
say?
That's the crux of this. Take what you just went through on 3 out. There was multiple times that staff believes they had direction from a board and a committee in which the board and the committee are saying they don't remember having that conversation.
So let me jump in and explain. So I think the fundamental issue here is, in the past, the terminology current waivers versus trailing waivers was not utilized. In the discussion, it was how is the payment going to take place? I'd like to ask our finance director, John Sawyers, to be able to explain this, because at the October 3rd meeting, A&F, Administration Finance Committee meeting, we had a discussion. We discussed it in structure, not in terminology of current waivers versus trailing waivers. We discussed it in terminology. I would like to ask Director Sawyers to explain it, because that was our understanding of what we heard through that meeting.
Okay,
And
and that's okay.
subsequently was current waivers.
And let's assume that occurred, right?
Yeah.
So let's save the time there, that occurred. the board, I was here for that meeting, I'm not on A&F, I was here for that meeting. There wasn't a word about trailing, current, do we want to talk trailing, current, do we want to go current, or we have a problem with the contractor in the middle of the project? No one here participated in that conversation. And that was the board discussion, which is board direction, not even at a committee level. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like anybody at A&F remembers any of that discussion.
The only discussion we had at A&F, just real quickly, was we don't pay until we get waivers.
All right, so correct. Okay,
Yeah.
well, but now that opens up can, because, okay, the next time, number 4 comes, and he doesn't bring them, then you gotta go, well, I'm not giving you a check. Absolutely. But that makes it sound like it's current. You have to give me, it's perception of how you're looking at what's being paid.
That's the problem, though.
And
So
that-
we weren't differentiating current
No,
versus...
we weren't.
And that discussion may have been had at A&F. It wasn't had on November 14th when I was here, which is the only time that I can see that this was board direction or even...
Well, we've got...
Can I say something, please? So I was at that meeting, and there was draw number 1 and 2 were both provided at that meeting. Draw 1 was for materials and deposits that a week prior to that weren't on site. We had an issue with it. Neither of the draws had waivers or anything with it. And A&F agreed to release the funds because I think that following week the materials were delivered. And A&F agreed to release draw number 1. And we said specifically that going forward, they were going to provide current waivers, and Mr. Petrakis agreed, it's on tape, that they would do that.
If we're talking about current versus trailing, that was not our understanding of it.
I mean, that's what was agreed on.
Here, you know what, though? This is all past us.
I
know where we're at. This won't happen again. Chris knows that this is what you got to do. You want your check, you got to bring it in.
Yeah, and and again, when you're talking current waivers, we're all thinking we're still doing the same thing. You're still bringing in the waivers, we're still doing the trailing.
But that's current for 3 to get 4. So that's how I'm reading it.
Like what they're saying, that their interpretation of what happened and what we recall is different. And anyway.
Yeah, the overarching though is that the A&F is not the board.
Right.
You might have 4 votes there that, that are not necessarily tight, but that is not board direction, that is a committee.
But that's still going before the board before anything is done. It's all
nothing
recommendation.
Other than this piece of paper that I pointed to earlier with 2 hunks of yellow copy on it that I'm supposed to decipher.
When was it that,
November 13th.
Yeah, it was the A&F meeting where draws number 1 and 2 were presented.
October 5th.
No, he's saying, when did this come to the board? When
And
did this go to the board?
And the contract says that the village can do this. It wasn't any contrary position to the project.
But we had a confusion between current and prevailing.
Oh,
I don't think those provisions are in contracts to say that the village has it in their purview to change those things if the contractor is not living up to his end of the bargain. He is. If he gives us a pay estimate and we pay it and we say, we're not giving you this check until you provide all these documents, and that's the way this game is played, he understands that. He's the one who's putting all that money at that point. We cut the check, we're not releasing it.
Like I said, we're kind of beating dead horse.
Real quick though, one thing. So you were at A&F on October 3rd, correct?
Both of us.
Okay. This discussion ensued in which you believed this was changing from trailing to current, and you said, that's fine, we'll do that?
No, we didn't. No. I didn't hear that ever. That would have been an immediate issue. I know.
Well, the only reason I ask is because through these discussions, it seems to me, and I've talked to multiple people about, is this trailing public projects, trailing? How come? For your work.
100% of all our projects are in private work.
Lori Parks.
100% trailing waivers.
Okay, so it seems to me that the professionals that do this certainly more than we do, if they were at an A&F meeting and the decision was to change from trailing to current, that may have been a red flag for the first time that you would have seen that so there may have been a misunderstanding, not a, yes, I agree, we're changing to current. And that's still just the committee, let alone the board where this conversation never happened and caught in the middle to some extent with fault on certain things. And see, that's my view. If you want to be slow on turning in, good luck, right? I mean, you take all the time you want, you're not getting the check.
Right, that's never the intent. We're dealing with some out-of-state suppliers that don't even know what a waiver is. We've had a Canadian supplier that are mandated to us to use on this project. So we're training them how to do waivers. I mean, that's part of the slowness. The other part of why this draw one backup took so long was there was a 3-week discussion about Integral needing to provide certified payroll or not, that as of the meeting that check was handed to me without waivers, hadn't been resolved yet. So I didn't come thinking I was getting a check. We were coming to talk about that issue still. And Mike handed me a check, and I said, okay, I don't have the waivers. Beth was sitting next to me, I think you remember this meeting, and he said, that's fine, just get them to us. So that's what happened.
We have a mass communication issue and clarity communication issue, which causes all of us to micromanage projects that we're not professionals or experts in.
Yeah, I agree. And not our job either.
Not our job.
Right? I mean, again, this isn't a full-time job for us. This is where we rely on professional staff.
Before we close this out, it's my understanding everyone's just sticking with trailing waivers. You don't need board direction to switch from one to the other. We're staying trailing waivers.
And we're current on the trailing
Right.
waivers.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Chris, when you come in with number 4 to pick it up, because I'm going to give you the check for 3, you have to give me 3 to get 4. I just want to, I want to make sure this is spelled out in detail because I didn't know, all I knew is we did not have the original releases. That's all I know. So when I found out there's 2 checks out already, that's when I put a stop to it, not to let anything else go. Then I was surprised when Chris said, well, I got it. I got all of them. But give them to me and we can get it set. So, I mean, all it was a miscommunication somewhere that just screwed up, and I just want to make sure I'm dialing you right in, saying you bring me the 4th one, and you bring me all the releases, or whoever's going to get them, then you get the check for it.
I would have told you that in August when we got awarded the job. We know that. That's the rules.
So we're very clear on it because I heard something tonight that you cannot release this check yet because there's a claim, and you said that their bond is not executed? Their performance and payment bond or their bid bond? Which one are you?
This document is not signed in several places.
What's on the transmittal? What document does it say it is?
It's from TRIA, it says certificate of insurance, payment bond, performance bond, safety letter, dated August 8th. It is not signed on page 4, and it is not signed on page 8.
Those pages don't get signed. It's the cover page that gets signed.
Yeah.
Is that the original bond?
No.
So you guys have the original bond that was handed over at an OAC meeting.
Well, it was not in my office.
Those are probably copies.
I don't have it.
You have it now?
I don't have it.
That's Mike, so Mike, you have the original bond?
Yes, it's in it was placed in her, the fireproof file cabinet.
How long ago?
Today.
From where?
I had it in my,
In your office?
yes.
This job did not start without executing.
No, I know.
I guarantee that.
So, with that said, we have
got a bond 2.
We have a bond 2. You're all clear. You're free to release pay request number 3.
Okay. And I will get that for you right now, I think. Who has it?
I think John will access it.
You want to give me that check, please?
That is a painful way to.
Mayor, last question on number 9 is in regards to payout number 4. Typically, these payouts will go through A&F, but since the next A&F committee meeting is not until January 9th.
You can bring it before the board. We don't
That's
have
the
to go through
question.
it.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, as long as all board members are there and they understand and we have exactly what we're needing, I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with giving them the check, you know, because that's what we said, we agreed to, it's waivers, correct?
Where do I remember seeing an issue about where we're going to have our December 26th meeting if we are having?
You want me to jump ahead on that?
Well, you know, see what we were worried about, we don't know if anyone's leaving, going out of town for Christmas, because
I think we left it on the schedule open for cancellation if at all.
Well, I know we did back in the beginning, end of October, or whenever that originally came up, it was like, this is a little far out, but, I mean, if we're trying to now get ahead of it.
Well, I guess the mayor's asking who is not available on the 26th?
Who's out of town?
Who wants to be?
The mayor.
If not, then it's the 19th.
Yes. Mayor, what I suggest as an alternate to move the meeting of the 26th to the 19th, and in the interest of time, to table two of the executive session items, the sale and lease of real estate and pending or imminent litigation, to that meeting, and only dealing with the one item of personnel and executive session.
So everyone okay with doing it on the 19th for executive session for two of the things on the list? And then we can get everything dialed in at the same time.
I am available on the 19th.
I'll have to see if I can move something, but I should be able to.
I should be able to do it.
I would prefer the 19th versus the 20th.
Just to clean that year up, so we don't have any of this stuff, just stick it on.
Just for exec, you said?
No, no.
Just for. Well, actually, you're taking two things off the executive right now, so.
I moved the two things off the executive to that meeting, but there will be several action items on that agenda.
Okay.
Including passing number one.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we should be able to, Chris, you think that by the 19th, you would have, I know it's today's what, the 12th?
Yes.
Or Thursday? Yeah, 12th.
The waivers, that's what we're draw three.
What we.
So you could get,
Yeah.
right, 3 to get 4. We're contemplating having a meeting on the 19th to get you your check 4. We're not going to do that. I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to totally do that, but what he's asking you is, will you have 3? Will you be ready for your check on the 19th?
Make it a top priority.
Right, just keep us in a little bit of lettuce here so we can make sure, because we want to get you paid. You know, this was a screw up. Unfortunately, it's on both sides. Let's just get it over with and be done. Okay, I need to get this right for
Last question for everyone. We have Integral here and the consultants here. Is there any questions? I know there were a lot of questions last time about the active pool. Anything that we didn't cover that anybody wants to talk about?
Well, a couple of the issues that we're going to have, like the bathroom with the toilet.
Well, we don't know that that's even an issue yet.
Well, that's why.
Right, and then Christina, that goes back to when you're like, oh, there's these issues. It's not an issue yet. When it's an issue, we'll let you know. But for you to think that there's an issue, that's their problem right now. That's not our problem. If they come to us and say, hey, we want you to get involved in that, then when you go, hey, now we might have an issue. It's not an issue.
Well, there's going to be some things we talk about, but let's find out what they are first. And
How do we resolve things like the crack benches and the pictures and that kind of stuff? That's going to be later on down the line.
Integral doesn't go away until that's all gets.
Oh, yeah, I just want to put it out there.
Absolutely.
One last thing. What's being missed in all of this is still a phenomenal project for this town.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's occurred and what it's going to be by late summer next year is something that is still going to be a phenomenal new asset for this town with the input and the creative ideas that have come forth through this process. So let's not lose sight of while we deal with some of the nonsense in the meantime. This is a great project for this town.
I'm just going to think of funding mechanisms to go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
is there any old business? Is there any new business?
Yeah.
Well, told now. You already know it's right. All right, so I need a motion to move into executive session for personnel. No action is going to be taken, so we're all set. You can go home, Grant, get off your legs so you can stand.
Sorry.
Carlo made the motion.
So who made the motion? Sharon, you seconded it? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
I'll be back.